We're on whenever you want to start.
Okay. I would like to open the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission for January 22nd, 2020. Please sign in if you haven't already. First item on the agenda is a conservation restriction for 25 Bonnie Lane, approval of conservation restriction area of Bonnie Lane and Spinnaker Lane.
So I'll speak to this, but part of the approval for the construction of this house was to put majority of the three properties, actually, there were three properties under a conservation restriction. They finished constructing the house. They drafted the conservation restriction, and I had some tweaks to it. I did put the language that was in the order of conditions in your site summary, so you knew what it said. I recommended omitting uses 3 and 4 and changing the language for number 10. Those looks like they were fairly boilerplate conditions, and dealing with putting in parking areas and benches and things like that that you might want for a large conservation area that has trails, but not this. So I'm recommending omitting 3 and 4 and changing the language in 10. We did talk about allowing the family to be able to walk out back in the property, but we want to dissuade, general public from using that property. We want to put under a restriction of public values. So I have spoken with the attorney about this, and they're in agreement about that. As long as we still allow for the family to walk back there.
They've gone through this and have no further comments?
They wrote it, and
Oh.
I made the changes. I proposed to omit the allowed uses of 3, 4, and to change the word on 10.
Okay, thanks.
So what this would do, you don't have to sign off on it, you just would vote for approval would be helpful. This would put them on track to request a certificate of, once this got recorded, request a certificate of compliance to close the project out with us.
Okay. Carolyn, do you want to start with any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine.
Stan?
No, I'm all set. I remembered that one.
So I think the original one was before my time, and so I have questions because both on Exhibit A2 on the plan, they're showing a volleyball court, a paved driveway in the corner that's adjacent to, it's at the end of the road, the drive that comes in there, and adjacent to, I assume, the house that you're talking about, although that's unclear to me as well. And when you look on the photo on Google Earth or Google Maps of that area, it shows a pretty big disturbed zone at the end of whatever the name of that street is, like they're in the middle of construction. And that photo, I think, is dated October 2018, which was several months after the original filing, maybe 6 months later. So I'm just curious. It doesn't look like, according to this restriction, any such disturbance is allowed. So what is going on there?
I visited the property a couple months back, and it is as per this plan is now. I don't know what was going on in 2018, but I do know that as per late, when I did we got the as-built site plan for it, it is as per what we permitted.
Okay. All right.
And it would be, the conservation restriction essentially is the limit of work line.
The limit of work line, so you're referring to Exhibit A2?
I'm looking at A2, yes.
Where is the limit of work line? I guess I didn't.
Around the volleyball court and almost mirroring the 50-foot buffer. But it goes outside the 50-foot buffer to into the 100.
Oh, I guess I didn't see where that qualification was in the restriction. Can you just point that out to me?
It's just, in the restriction,
Well, if it's deed restriction, unless it says it explicitly there, I mean, the conservation restriction, it should apply to all 3 lots completely.
with the exception of area within the limit of work, which we can have them reference if they didn't.
I didn't see that in there.
Okay, I can
Some,
check.
I can't claim to have thoroughly read every sentence in there, so.
Yeah, I'm just skimming it.
um,
So it does say on Exhibit A, except this conservation restriction shall not apply to that area shown within the approved limit of work attached on the Ryder and Wilcox site plan. As
Oh.
exhibit, yeah.
Okay.
Essentially,
Okay.
we were allowing them to do a lot of things
Well,
because of they were willing
yeah,
to
I
do
know.
the restriction on.
That's
Major
They
fine.
actually
area.
aren't even using the driveway off Bonnie Lane, they're going off of this street that's to the south, so all that area is not disturbed either.
Off of Spinnaker Lane.
Yes,
Ah,
right,
I see.
that was all disturbed, but a lot of that's actually outside the 100-foot buffer, some of that's outside the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah, it looked like the disturbed area was all, to me, it looked like it was all outside the 100-foot buffer, so.
Was all where?
Outside the
Outside? Okay.
100-foot buffer.
Okay.
That's it?
That's it. Thank you.
Mark, any comments?
Abstain.
Oh, that's right. Ernie?
So which ones are we deleting on this, which provisions?
Numbers 3, under permitted uses, which is
Okay,
fourth page,
okay, so under
3,
the,
4, and changing 10.
yeah, so under the reserved rights,
Mhm.
we're gonna allow the erection or maintenance of signs or kiosks and that sort of thing?
That would be, well, it should just be signage if the trust wanted to put signage up there.
Okay, so,
You take kiosks out.
identity or location of trails, areas of interest, natural features and all that kind of stuff, I assume that would be the kiosks, right? You just might wanna limit that, I think, because I don't imagine if we're going to limit the activities that
You
can
don't
take
need a kiosk.
place. Well, yeah, we certainly don't. Yeah.
Okay. Alright. I'll change number 2.
Do you think this property would be inclined to have trails? And it's pretty small, yeah.
I think, yeah, I think the restriction can just be
It's more-
tailored a little bit to be a little more specific.
It's more for preservation rather than access, right?
Yes, that's the intent.
I just would revise my previous statement. I said I thought it looked like it was mostly outside of the 100-foot buffer, but that statement was based on looking at the GIS map, but I'm looking at the plan on A2, and it's clear it's well within the 100-foot buffer. Not that it's clear anyway. According the wetland on this, as laid out on A2, is much bigger than what shows up on the GIS map.
Right, it is large.
Any further comments? I move that the Conservation Commission vote in support of the conservation restriction for 25 Bonnie Lane.
Second it,
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
one abstention.
One abstention. Okay, next we have a request for determination of applicability for 588 Queen Anne Road, proposal for vista pruning, creation of a trail, and installation of a wood bench.
The only thing you were waiting for was to hear back from the Natural Heritage Program. I told the representatives from HCT I didn't think they needed to come tonight. They didn't need to come tonight. They did get a letter saying the project will not have an adverse impact on any state listed species or habitat. So I recommend approval with a -2 determination.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Any comments around the table? Start with Carolyn.
No? but I think they'd be a nice addition.
Mm-hmm.
No comment.
Yep.
No comment.
No?
No remarks.
The
Okay.
only question I had was where will they be depositing the pruning, the deference from the pruning?
They'll either be burning it on site in pile burns or removing it.
Okay, should we specify that?
I can.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and motion that we approve the request for determination of applicability for 588 Queen Anne Road.
Second.
Second by Mark. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next, we have an RDA for 2092 Head of the Bay Road. Proposal of abandoned cesspools and installation of a septic system.
Yes, good evening. Matt Farrell from O'Reilly & Associates, representing George and Catherine Lamont. This is a really unique property off the head of the Bay Road. It's approximately 2.8 acres. There's an existing cesspool about 67 feet from the bordering vegetated wetland, so we've set a limit of work around that. The proposal is to abandon that, tie into the plumbing that comes out of that side of the house, into a septic tank and a 3-bedroom leaching facility that is outside the 100-foot buffer zone. And I'm going to keep it simple. I'll open up to questions from the commission.
Okay, thank you. Any summary comments? Pretty simple.
Very straightforward. This is an improvement over existing, going from something leaching within the 100-foot buffer to the leach area will be outside of it. It'll be Title V compliant. So I would recommend approval with a -3 determination.
Okay. Any comments?
No, very straightforward. I agree totally with Amy.
Matt, do you know if they're gonna be in the sewer zone?
I do not know. I doubt it. They're like way out in
Yeah, I know.
the woods.
Actually, if they are.
And it's in that kind of odd part of town where Orleans, Harwich, and Brewster come together. I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion on the RDA?
I would move to accept the RDA for 2092 Head of the Bay Road.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Stan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Please sign.
Thank you, folks. Have a good night.
You too. Next on the agenda, we have the notice of intent for 21 Deacons Folly Road, proposal to raise and replace the dwelling.
I don't think these were in your packets in the past few hours.
I brought some I can hand out.
Thank you.
Good evening, David Little from Ryder and Wilcox.
I'm Allison Richardson from Brown Richardson Road. Good evening.
So, the site plan has been revised. The majority of the work that has changed on it is really the hardscaping that was proposed in the 0 to 50-foot buffer. Allison was not able to attend the meeting 2 weeks ago, which is just as well, because I don't think we left here until 11. But, so she did see your video and heard your comments and has made revisions to the plan. So to reiterate I'll just talk about the building and then let Allison discuss her mitigation plan. So I had showed you this the last time. We are rebuilding the house in its existing footprint. The foundation is not changing at all. There is a second floor overhang on the street side of the structure, and the posts supporting the deck are in the same place. We would like to have a 3-foot cantilever, so the only increase in the structure is this here and that there, but everything else is happening within the existing footprint. And then I wasn't able to explain Allison's landscaping as well as it deserves, so I'll turn it over to her.
So if you recall, the plan before, let me just start to begin with, that the proposed house is somewhat different than the existing in that there's living space in this area. And so there needs to be access, not just inside, but outside, and also out from this area. This is where the furnace and other utilities are going to be. This is actually going to be, developed living space. So, that being said, this plan is the planting plan, but it represents the deck is like this over. So what we did was to reduce the amount of structure, really listen to what you all said, in the buffer zones. We moved the walkway that had been just outside of the deck, under the deck, so that it's coincident with the deck. So the structure above, and there's the deck, there actually is an existing deck, a new deck then, and then there's development underneath the deck, and that's accessible by the residents. The way to get down here that makes the most sense, because they wanted to be able to get off the decks onto grade, is along this side. For that reason, and also because it's higher here, so that we can have a stair that's just outside of the deck. It has to be, or you can't get under the deck. You have to get down low enough to get back under the deck to get in here and then here. We've also changed the elevation of under the deck to be lower than what had been shown before. So that, and the reason for that was to reduce the stair and keep it outside of the 25-foot buffer. And so you can see these stairs are under the deck. So that, before it had been a longer stair, and now it's a shorter stair. It's tucked into the grade there. And when you walk outside, you go down 1 and then you go down 3. So it's actually a 2-foot change in grade between the inside and the outside. And the elevation of the building is set to try to fit into the grade, and also for the septic in the front. So, and then the change in floor height that is a reasonable change in grade. So what we did was, we eliminated that path, put it underneath. We still have a little bit outside. This is still a little bit outside so that we can get under. We reduced that. We do have 2-step ramps, but this is twice as steep as it was before. We had more step ramps. And this is like 10%, 12% grade now to there. Before it was less. We had more step to have less disturbance. And we also eliminated all of the structure here, and this is all planted now with wild native plants. And we eliminated a portion of the, there had been a little bit more pathway here. We eliminated that. And otherwise, and we actually have less disturbance even with planting in the 50-foot zone. And all the plantings are all native and proposed to eliminate and eradicate the invasive species and some of the garden plants there that had been planted there before. And I don't know if you want to know some of the plants, but they're in the packet. So, and we're replacing, and we were actually able to save 1 more tree, so we have slightly fewer trees. And as you remember, this is a completely full wooded site, and it had been kind of abandoned for a long time. And the front is crushed stone with an island, and the septic system is here. You can kind of see it underneath. So that is kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Okay, thanks. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Sure. At the last meeting, the commission requested to reduce as much as possible any increase in the 0 to 50-foot buffer zone. kind of focusing mostly on walkways and retaining walls and things like that. So that was the majority of the increase, and I think they've done that. They still do have an increase of 155 square feet, but that's a lot less than before. They've eliminated completely a walkway a formal walkway on one side of the house, and I think the other side where they are planning it is, you know, between the 50 and 100 foot buffer more so. Kind of consolidated their activity as much as I think they can, that I can see. It's a very heavily wooded site. There is no lawn, not proposed to be any lawn. And they are replacing with trees, which is nice as well. So, let me see. We do have the coverage calculations that you just got, which I didn't have when I finished writing this. So, you have that. Let's see. So we did receive a letter from the neighbors of this property attesting that the raised boardwalk that goes through the bordering vegetated wetland to the dock has been there since the home was built in 1971. This would predate the Wetlands Protection Act and our local bylaw. However, there was an amnesty period in the 1990s for people who had unlicensed dogs to license them, and we don't think they did. I would recommend that you have them file the appropriate things, Chapter 91, notice of intent if they wanted to build for those things. But I do think that they are, in a sense, have been there since the predating regulation. I'm not going to challenge that.
Well, the history of the area is one man, a developer, bought a lot of these lots on Deacon's Folly, and he came in and he built a bunch of houses in this area and sold them, and with each house, when he developed them, he provided access from the houses to the pond. And but back in the early 70s, you really just needed a building permit for the house, and so nothing was ever, and so we did get an affidavit from the neighbor that lived there attesting to that.
And I'm just saying now, if you need to, I mean, it looks like you probably need some work done to it anyways, that you, now that since it needs work, it's new work.
So I emailed the owner, and I indicated that the commission would most likely want a separate NOI for those, and we are certainly amenable to do that.
Yeah. So I think with those, with the changes that they proposed, I know we have people who are more knowledgeable than I about walkways and grading on this board, so we can talk about that, but I am inclined to recommend approval of the project as now presented.
Thank you, Amy. Carolyn, any comments?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Stance? Yep.
I have a couple of questions. One is, I didn't quite get your explanation of the stairs. I can't quite picture the outside stairs on the western side going around.
Okay.
Can you run that by me
Sure.
again? I'm sorry.
So, if you imagine that there's a deck here, and it's up high, and you start at this point, which is, you know, coming off the deck and on the side of the house, you have to go down and around to get under
Okay,
the
so
deck. You can't just go under the deck, because there's no, it's the same elevation, so it takes that long to get down and under.
So these stairs are strictly exterior stairs. There's not an entrance door to the house leading to the stairs. I didn't.
There's a door under the deck. There is
There's
At the
four
bottom of the
there's
stairs,
four
not at the
doors.
top. These are not to get from.
There is there is a door off the deck that you can walk to from the deck down a few stairs and then turn and go down the bigger stairs.
But they're basically exterior
They're exterior stairs so that you
There's
can
a
have
landscape feature.
on-grade, but it's more than that, because there's no other way to get, if you want to get down there without going inside or get out and get up to, you know, let's say if there's a fire even.
Yeah.
But they're not part of the structure, not part of the building.
No,
Okay, all right.
no, but it's more of an access,
Uh-huh.
because there's living space, and it's not just, and just being able to get into that
There's
area.
living space at the basement level
Yeah.
and there access for that living space.
So we're providing yeah.
Okay. So then I have a question about proposed coverage where you're showing a total of, let's call it 900 square feet of additional coverage, most of it in the 50 to 100.
Mhm.
What is that? What is that composed
It's a
of?
crushed stone driveway.
Oh, that's all about the driveway.
It's crushed stone driveway, yeah.
So, but the deck is hanging.
And there's a little,
but
there's a
part of
little,
it-
there's a little bit, and there's the getting up into the,
A couple hundred square feet of it is this cantilever for the deck.
That's
oh, you're talking about the
155
front or the back?
I'm trying to, well,
Okay.
I'm
Just the
talking about
whole number.
Oh, the
whole
whole
thing.
number,
I'm just-
okay. Oh,
So-
between the 50 and 100, okay.
The 155 is the cantilever of the deck, is that what you're saying?
No,
No, I don't know.
part of that is the landscaping that Allison's proposing, and I calculated that 108 square feet of it is the cantilever for the deck. 108 square feet of the 155 is the cantilever.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just have a couple questions about the plant selections.
Sure.
You said these are all native plants, and most of those look familiar to me. The ones that I've never seen on a landscape plan before are wild ginger and the, what do you call it? It's a ground-covered dogwood.
Those are native woodland plantings, native woodland species, yeah. I'm a landscape architect, so.
I'm sorry?
They're
I did-
native woodland species.
Okay, which will do well here on?
They should, yeah, they should.
Okay. I was looking up the ground cover dogwood anyway, and one description said it was good up to hardiness zone 6. That is, it doesn't like hot weather, so it's a curiosity to me.
It's, I would say that this particular location is not, I mean, it's so shady
I see.
and cool, and it has the moisture from the pond, and, I mean, I think that it needs to get established, you know, when it's first planted, and they're gonna take care of it. Once it's established, it should be fine.
Okay,
It's
thank
actually a
you.
really nice plant. It's a beautiful plant. It's really, it's only that small, it's not
Right,
very.
Okay, I'm all set,
Set.
thank you.
Mark, any comments?
Yeah, a couple of questions. The stairs coming around the corner from the corner of the house, down and around the deck, are they freestanding or are they tied to the retaining wall that's going to be at the perimeter there as well?
I think that it's shown tied to the retaining wall. Yeah.
That's what I'm assuming it is. Okay. So then it steps down, you get a solid surface underneath. You're going to have a fair amount of runoff in there because of all that paved surface. To me, it would be a good idea to have some protection to grab that water before it drifts too far away.
I think that makes some sense, that at the landing, for instance, there might be just a little area drain. It wouldn't daylight or anything.
I don't think an area drain right there is going to be adequate. If that whole surface underneath is going to be,
It's all going to be gravel, and, you know, it'll be.
so it's not a paved surface underneath,
Oh, do you mean underneath the?
under the decks?
Under the decks. The decks are covered. The decks are covered.
But she is proposing bluestone under there, but
Yeah, but
on a
the-
gravel base. All the
On a gra-
bluestone is on a
And with
sand.
open jointed, but the decks are covered, so that the only rain that could possibly get in there would be if we tipped it back, which we're not doing, we're having a slight pitch. And it just would be rain that would not fall directly down, it would have to be blown rain. So it's not like it's exposed to the, do you know what I mean?
Yep, I do.
Because there's a roof over the deck.
Okay. With a grade change on the eastern patio before you go down to the pond, looks like there's about a 3-foot grade differential right there. What are you going to do on the perimeter to hold that up? You got some sort of a wall fashioned in there?
Yeah,
to-
there's like a cheek wall, and so the grade can just fall along it,
Okay,
the natural grade.
okay. I think there should be some provision in there to catch the water throughout the perimeter.
Explain to me what you're looking at, because I'm not following you. This is the area you're talking about.
You're gonna land right here, right?
Yep.
Okay. So the opening for any drainage is gonna be through here?
But this is covered.
I understand.
This, if there, rain falls here.
But the water doesn't care. The water's going in, and then it's gotta find a way out. So
This,
to
this is
avert-
open, this is open, this is open gravel. These are like stepping stones and gravel,
Okay,
so that'll help.
okay, you're right, that will help. Along this perimeter right here,
Okay?
how much of that's covered?
It's all planted.
No, but above,
It's all covered. The whole thing is covered.
okay, so you still got a grade change from the surface here to the
Yeah.
planting bed, right?
Well, this is really at grade. That's 24, and the existing 24 contour is right there, so it's not like falling like that right away. I'm not showing the grades here. This is the planting plan.
Well, I'm looking at the site plan over here.
You want me
And
to
it-
show you the grading plan? You want to look at the grading?
Do you have, yeah, do you have a grade
Okay,
plan right
sure.
there?
I have an 11 by 17, Allison, if that's sufficient.
Excuse me.
24 comes like that,
Yep.
and
All right, so contour line.
this is just the shrub bed
Yep,
line. So we're really on grade. This is 24 here.
okay.
This is 24.
Yep, yep, I see what you're.
This is coming down like this. That's what
Correct.
shrub bed comes down like that now.
Absolutely.
And we did put a little retaining wall there, even though that's underneath, because...
Understood.
Okay. We need to be
Okay.
able to not have to be too...
You're gonna have the same in-kind material coming down.
This is
here as well.
bluestone, and then that's mulch, and a step, mulch, step, mulch.
Okay.
And this is just a post and rope to keep people off the...
Okay, I understand what you're doing. All right. Done?
Ready?
Amy, I need some clarification. So the dock was installed in 71. You say there was an amnesty period at one point in the 1990s?
Yes.
And if they didn't file for a license for the dock, does that mean the amnesty period is just ignored? What does it mean if they didn't?
It's, they
Well-
should have taken it. Go
Well,
ahead.
I think what it means is during the 1990s, if I came before this commission or any other commission with a license application for a dock in saltwater or freshwater, you were obligated to endorse it.
Right.
Now, because the dock was never licensed, I have to start from scratch. I have to file a notice of intent. I have to demonstrate to you and get an order of conditions before I can even go for a license. And what Amy is saying is that if this is repaired or changed, I have to do that. So I'm going to follow this up with a new notice of intent. And basically, you're treating it like a new project, but it does exist. We're going to replace it in kind. And assuming I get an order of conditions for it, then I'll go to the state for a license, because Sand Pond is a great pond.
I see. All right. But in the meantime, you can use the existing dock.
It needs fixing.
It needs fixing.
Yeah.
I've walked out on it.
Right.
I don't think many people would want to right now.
I walked
So
out
I
on
think
it
it's in our
today.
best interest
Yeah.
to come back to,
Yeah. It seems fairly strong, I mean, fairly sound.
yeah, oh, yeah.
In its current condition and everything. Now, if you do repair it, okay, so if you repair it, you'll have to come to us.
Repair,
Right now,
replace
it's only
anything.
about 2 feet wide, I think, the walkway going out there or so. So if you wanted to expand, maybe 3, but if you wanted to expand that to the 4 foot allowed, then it would have
We
to
would
be.
need the permit,
Yeah.
need the
Okay.
permit to do so.
All
And
right.
I think that the owners want to have some kind of a rope or something. 'cause they
Along
have
one,
grandchildren.
along one,
They have
s-
Which would
one
also
side of it, a road
require a
trailer.
permit, I assume.
Oh,
Any
absolutely.
amendments to it, yeah. Do you know if they plan to do any vista pruning at all?
No.
None at all? Okay,
I would say it wouldn't be allowed under this permit. so.
yeah. All right.
They have a nice filtered view, and that's, we're not, we really just want to rebuild the house with this application.
Yeah,
And-
with a lot of changes on the lake side, the pond side of it, though.
The landscaping that Allison's proposed, yes.
Well, one question, though. Right now, I went out to the property, and I can't recall, because I didn't look up, but is there a roof over the existing deck?
No, we're asking for that.
All right, so that's going to be a significant change in the 0 to 50, though, because right now, the deck is open. Water goes through the deck. So what they're proposing is to put a roof over it that's going to cause runoff toward the pond.
And we're, on the plan, I have a construction note that states that all stormwater runoff will be connected to gutters and downspouts to dry wells.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so close to the wetland at the base of that slope that
It-
even a dry well is going to leach into the pond, I think. I mean, you're taking basically the width of that deck and putting it into a dry well, whereas it would be currently 8 feet farther away from the pond than what you're going to propose going forward.
So what would have fallen onto the deck and then onto the ground below it will now be, that square footage will be will be collected
In a dry
by
well,
a gutter
closer
to
to
the
the pond.
downspout. Well, I could,
You can't go uphill with a dry well, right?
no, I don't, but I could go over here. I could, you can't go uphill, but if you look at this section, a gutter and downspout can come down like this and go back like that. So I can direct the stormwater so it's further away from
Okay.
the
That-
wetland than
yeah.
it would be.
Yeah, I think that would
I
be very
I
positive.
could do that.
Yeah, that'd have a good impact, I think. The other, and I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting when this discussion was held, but I guess I'm, in looking at the calculations, and I know you mentioned 105 feet of further encroachment into the 50 is because of the cantilever. And I know when we've looked at other projects like this, for example, that home that was on the top of 28, right at the entrance to Round Pond, and they proposed a cantilever deck there, and we said absolutely not. You know, it just can't happen.
Could I make a comment when you're done with your comment about that? Thanks.
So the proposal is for an additional, as someone mentioned, 900 feet of encroachment within the protected area, and yet the mitigation that's proposed is less than 300 feet under what we would require. So I'm just really struggling with the proposal here, and it just seems like we're not really protecting what we could with this.
If I may, Mr. Crabtree, the portion, the cantilever that's occurring on this side is occurring between the 50 and the 100-foot buffer. It's on this side that we are proposing a 3-foot cantilever there, and that constitutes 108 square feet. What I will acknowledge...
In the 0 to 50.
In the 0 to 50. What I will acknowledge is that I just produced these mitigation figures today, and Allison and I both noted that we are, according to your regulations, we are shy by 305 square feet.
Right.
And we just picked up on that today. And Allison has an opportunity to provide more mitigation right on the water side of where she's proposing these steps to go around, which could also act as an additional infiltration for any stormwater that isn't intercepted between the gravel spaces between the pavers. So,
You know, I'll concede this is a very difficult lot to work with, given where the house is currently situated and the amount of space that you have with that slope all of a sudden dropping off in the back. But I don't think that necessarily is a rationale for us allowing a variance within the 0 to 50. Or 0 to 60, as we've tried to enforce too.
Thank you, Ernie. If I can follow up on your question, what happened last meeting, there was concern from several members about having any new increases for coverage in the 0 to 50, but it wasn't quantified, so we asked that they quantify it, and that was done. So, thank you for doing that, but I will say that I think my concern is still there. It seems to me it's a project where you could eliminate any increase in the 0 to 50, given its complete rebuild. And so I'm not supportive of a variance in this case, even though it's a fairly modest increase, and you've done a great job of trying to minimize that. My concern's still there. I think it's a case where the deck is increasing, it appears to me, a little bit. I don't think it needs to increase in this case in 0 to 50. So that's my concern, and I would ask if there's anything that the project could do to just eliminate that. We're trying to not have increases in coverage in 0 to 50 with these type of rebuilds. And to me, it seems like you've got the space to achieve your goals, and it's a pretty modest reduction to change that deck a little bit.
Could I make a
Sure.
comment, which I wanted to, and I totally understand what you both are talking about, but if you look at the, underneath the deck, which is what I was responsible for, to try to reduce the structure that was shown in the previous plan and make it so that you can get into that living space. If you look at it, you walk out of there's a slider and there's a door. Now this is, and the floor elevations are set by the architect and based on the engineers and my contribution to how it fits in the ground and also the septic. That you walk out that door and there's a small landing. You just don't step out onto a step. And then you go down as far as you can go down, so you're not making a hole. And the piers, the columns, are only 2 feet away from the bottom of that step. So that's why so I figured if, because there is an extension, then you are able to have the 3 feet at the bottom of the step. It goes beyond the existing. And so we were between a rock and a hard place to make it safe, and have a place to be. And because it was proposed to be coincident, I mean, you're having an issue with the elevation, the extension of the deck, but it also affects being able to get into there. And, I think it's possible to reduce a little bit, but to totally eliminate it, then I think that the whole elevation would have to completely change because there are steps underneath there.
And just to be clear, we're not just talking deck, we're also talking extension of the roof as well. Correct?
But I guess that whenever I'm a conservation commissioner, and in my town, decks aren't considered permeable because they're so small that they don't actually consider that covered. That's interesting to me that you consider that permeable.
It's structure. It would be.
It's a structure, okay. Well, I'm just thinking about it from a permeability point of view, that a deck is considered cover, so it doesn't matter if you have a roof on it or not. But that's just, all conservation commissioners have different ways of interpreting that.
You can't adjust that ramp in terms of length or slope to...
I don't have a ramp. Which ramp?
Under the deck.
He's talking about.
You mean the stairs?
Yes.
The stairs are to be able to the thing that drove this was keeping out of the basically keeping that stair out of the 25, and then I actually lowered it a whole nother 1.5 feet than what was shown before, to try to make that stair down to the dock as small as possible. But, the grade change in elevation between the front of the house and the back of the house, as designed with the floor elevations, I can't make the stair any smaller.
You couldn't put the stairs on the east side of the deck? Going
No, because
back
it's-
along the side of the house?
No, because
That's
steeper. It's worse.
And we'd have more coverage in the 0 to 50 then.
And more coverage in the 0 to 50, exactly.
I I hear where you're coming from, Brad, and in my experience with this board, I think we at least need to ask for a continuance to talk to the client and see if we can somehow fix this.
I don't know, I actually don't know how to fix it. I'm just gonna say that out loud.
The thoughts that I mean.
I don't know how to fix it
Look at
with, you know, with this footprint. I mean, if the existing house had been in a different place, or a different configuration, but they're trying to keep exactly the same footprint. And
It's not exactly, you know,
I'm talking about the house, not the deck.
yeah.
So, you know, that being said, from a site point of view, it's, you know, I mean, in terms of providing access that's reasonable access, that's not, you know, walking down a steep slope and eroding the slope, because you have families walking down the slope, or family walking, you know, I mean, that's an issue too, that I would be concerned about.
I'm having trouble understanding how you can't just, that slope, that walkway slope can't be extended or modified slightly, because the 155 is a very small amount. I don't know.
Oh,
why-
we could add more mitigation, but to make there less, I guess that,
Well, can I just interject here? It seems to me
it's
that
difficult.
the real sticking point here, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, is that the owners want a spacious deck there. That's why they want the cantilever.
It isn't
It's
just
for
that.
making space on the deck. And you're talking about requirements for egress in the basement entry. But it looks to me like there's a lot of room for deck on the east half of the house.
In the 50? You mean the west side?
Aren't there, I mean the west side.
Okay, I understand
I
what you're
do mean
saying.
the west side. I mean, there's a big deck on the west side as well as the east side, is that right? So, I mean, it partly is a question of whether or not, I mean, what you're really trying to do is satisfy the owner's requirement for extra deck space more than is there now with the existing house. That seems to me the crux of the problem here. And they're asking for a little more space in the 0 to 50, and what you're being told is that this commission does not want to grant that.
Amy, any thoughts? Thank you, Joe.
It's hard to tell with the plan here with setbacks to the road, but I mean, I'm sure you've already looked at this, but if you haven't, checked to see setbacks from the street and see.
Oh,
if it's-
we're, as it is, the septic system is, we can't move it any closer to the
Okay,
street.
so
And
that-
we've
that
looked
would've
into
been a
that.
really easy-
So I think we're close.
I think so. You're not hearing too much else. Mark
No,
had a couple
no.
of comments.
And I understand where you're coming from as the Conservation Commissioner, but this isn't the first time I've heard the 0 to 50 argument from the
Oh,
commissioners,
Yeah,
so.
no, and I respect that. I mean,
I would like.
I'm just talking about it as a designer.
No, but I.
Given how, you know, like fitting this in and having as little disturbance as possible, I really, really tried. I mean, I think there were 5 or 6 different plans that I've gone through on this site, and it's just a residential, I mean, I designed Spectacle Island, so it's like in the harbor, so this is, you know, it's amazing how much grade there is on this site and how tight it is. I mean, the building goes right to the edge. So it's a real little puzzle. And I totally respect what you want. And I think you did hit on that, you know, the deck in the 50 is, you know, is in terms of affecting the site development to get that egress. So that's something that I
So
think. we have to go back and.
I'll be the bad guy here and ask for a 2-week continuance.
2 weeks? Okay.
But we can also add more
But I
mitigation
think-
planting as well, I mean,
You can come back with that as an option, but, you know, you're hearing some sentiment that this is...
that's not that's not an option.
Well, to me, you know, the variance really requires a hardscape or a net improvement to the resource area. There's a couple things that have to click for a variance, and I'm not sure in this site that I'm seeing that. But we have different opinions on the, you know, commission too on this, but I've been fairly consistent for some time about this.
February 5th would be the
February
date.
5th? Okay. Well, I move that we continue the hearing until February 5th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's seconding that?
All right. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
These are the two that I'd recommend you announce the next two simultaneously.
Okay. All right, next on the agenda, we have 2 notice of intents for emergency repairs. First property is 33 Snow Road, emergency repair to an existing bulkhead. The second property is 23 Snow Road, emergency repairs to an existing boathouse and accessory structure.
Carolyn has to recuse herself.
We had a meeting yesterday with Amy on the site, and there were a couple of changes that we indicated to her based on the exploratory work we did. So I made some revisions to the plan. She asked me to bring those in tonight so there's no confusion between what's actually going to be done for the work and what was proposed to be done for the work. The proposal, as you remember, was under an emergency, and that proposal was based on a visual of the exterior of the existing bulkhead and the boathouse. Then during the process of exploring the areas where we're trying to install the steel sheets, there was found a number of obstructions that would make it impossible to fit in those locations. So I'll hand out the plans that and point out the changes to the commission so you can follow along. Those are the smaller ones, and I got a couple of them.
So you put these revised into the Dropbox now?
I don't know if you did.
There
by
are
the end
files
of the day.
labeled revised in here.
So,
Dated. I mean, what's getting handed out is
Three plans running around. We've incorporated both properties onto one plan, and then we used bolding to show the difference in ownership in terms of who's responsible financially, install what part of the bulkhead. That's the primary reason for it. Plus, it gives you an idea of who's going to be responsible for which portion of the particular style bulkhead. So, what we found, if I may point out,
This is where the 11720 is.
yes.
oh, actually, put on the side of your plan,
Oh,
it
yeah,
says
yeah.
January 22nd over here on this end.
Yeah, that's just the drawing file, so that always stays the same. The rev is
Nice,
usually,
nice.
yeah, the rev is usually in the rev block. So the primary change from the original time you saw this lightly shaded area right here is the boathouse. We originally proposed, let me get my bearings right. We originally proposed to go to the west, behind the boathouse with the bulkhead, and then out, and then along the main long building that goes along the channel. There's so many obstructions in this location that it's virtually impossible for the crane to get the hammer in a location where it can actually drive the sheet. So what we propose in this particular plan revision is that the bulkhead comes out along the boathouse towards the channel, then along the front of the boathouse as an overwash, so that it protects the piles from any sediment loss that we're putting under the boathouse as the emergency repair to the foundation of the boathouse, and then continue back along the edge of the exposed foundation under the long building that goes along the channel. That's the primary change. And then also in this location where there is a return that we think is concrete. It's hard to tell what it is, but it's definitely obstruction. We can't put this return going back that way to protect the deck and any washout that might happen behind the Helfrich property. So we're proposing to come out to the limit of the building that's right next door that's owned by Amalgamated. So those are the two changes. Changes are primarily to address any loss of material that might take place if we don't put a return in some location. It would be really nice to be able to go landward with the returns like we typically do, but we can't because of the obstructions, the roof lines, the buildings, and their proximity to one another, and the size of the hammer. From my understanding, the hammer needs to be is about 2 to 2.5 feet wide that holds the top of the steel sheet, and that has to go actually all the way down to drive depth. Can't fit in between the buildings.
Okay, thank you.
So this is I'll just go through it brief. This is an after-the-fact notice of intent. The work that has been done so far, I alluded to some of it, that we did the interior demolition of the boathouse is prepared to receive the piles. The temporary shoring that was done to the boathouse so that it's stabilized while they do any pile driving. Also, the installation of the silt curtain to keep any siltation going into the main channel has been installed. As I'm sure you saw if you were at the site today, the barge and the crane are mobilized to the site. They have got the Greenheart piles in a staging area. They've got the sheet pile steel in a staging area. And then also we did engineering and discovery work to find out how we were logistically going to be able to do the actual work. That caused the refinement and the changes to the plan. The performance standards we have to meet because it isn't after the fact. Land under ocean, land containing shellfish. There really isn't any coastal bank. The beach is somewhat always underwater now because of the change in elevation. The change in elevation of the sediment in front of the Helfrich bulkhead is the reason for the vinyl sheets to be in a state of failure, and the undermining of the foundation of the long building and going along the channel in that little section in between the boathouse, that is needed to be protected so no more undermining takes place. So we are in those two resource areas, but we're trying to minimize by only going outboard of what is already existing as to the minimum possible.
Okay, thank you. Amy, any summary thoughts on this one?
Sure. So when you authorized me to issue the emergency certification that is valid for 30 days, that ran out on January 1st. That emergency certification kicks in the need to do an after-the-fact notice of intent, which is what this is, even though it's not after the fact yet. So my recommendations tonight, we've all kind of talked a little bit to the harbor master about this as well, and he's not comfortable with anything that extends farther into the navigable waters being approved under an emergency without his more review. But what I would recommend tonight, because this has to go to waterways in February anyways, that's your process, is it has to go to waterways for review, is that we talk about the reauthorization or authorization of a new emergency certification tonight to do the work, as long as we don't include a return at towards the navigable channel.
And Amy's
That would be, go ahead.
talking about this section right, right out here.
Yes.
The outside return, I talked to Cole, who did some of the structural work, I talked to John Bologna, and I talked to Roger. What we would like to do is at least be able to put this sheeting in to protect the piles and protect the foundation, but then probably to reduce any scour that may take place. There is riprap that's up in here, maybe just continue that riprap down along the back side of this particular wall, and then eliminate this return right here so that we don't lose any material out. as the overwash takes place. So then John would be more satisfied because we wouldn't be going any further out towards the channel than the limit of the existing building that goes along the channel.
How does that relate to, I guess, B, bulkhead type B? That's showing, is that what you're
Oh, yes, so it is a little confusing because we show all the sections on both plans, but the sections F, C, and D are for the work that's done basically around the boathouse and the Weechmere Harbor Club's building. Then the other sections A, B, and C are for the work around the Helfrich property. So your question, I'm sorry, Brad, is just...
It looks like you've got some material that's going to be seaward of the present boundary, and it looks like it might be, I don't know, 3.5 feet?
Which, that section right
B,
here.
yeah, bulkhead type B.
That material is in between the proposed steel sheet and the existing vinyl sheet. We have to infill that because if we don't, and it overtops, then sediment could get, and water could get down and back here and then cause underscour.
Yeah.
So that material is up, actually, it's gonna be almost at eye level.
Right?
That's on the inner
Yeah,
part, though.
behind the steel.
Oh,
Not,
also
not
that-
shoreward, I meant not seaward,
not seaward.
not
That's,
seaward, no.
Okay.
So waterways,
Sorry.
no, you're fine. This waterways meets middle of February.
Yes.
And I definitely, you need to really vet this, and I'd be happy to facilitate a meeting with John Rendon to all sit down together as well, prior to that meeting. But I think, no, this didn't happen as quickly as we thought it was going to. Mr. Helfrich provided a timeline for you, which I asked for yesterday, because we want to see what has been done. The Winchmere has proactively prepped the site as much as they can for this. There was a delay, not ideal, but it kind of is what it is. We do have a report from a structural engineer stating that these facilities are in a state of failure. So I still think you should grant another 30-day emergency certification for the project, but continue the after the fact until later in February.
Amy, can you comment on some of the changes that have happened since the last proposal we saw?
The major change since the last time is that instead of going underneath the boathouse with the steel sheets, they're going right in front of it, essentially, or flush with it and around instead of underneath. They can tell you why they're doing that. And then they did find out that because of the roof line, that instead of being able to be exactly flush with the Harbor Club facility, it would have to be a little bit farther out, which, especially on the channel side, John is not comfortable with.
Just the roof line, not,
Yeah,
not the
there's an
in-water
overhang,
structure.
there's an overhang on the roof, which is actually structural. We were thinking about trying to remove it, but there's no way you can remove that to try to get it
Yeah.
inboard, so.
Right.
We looked to
Those are the changes.
Right, so I guess my question for you is, are there now more alterations to either coastal beach or land in the water than we were told before, by having that not under the boathouse but come out a little bit? It seems to me like you've got alteration to resource area that wasn't discussed at the last meeting.
I think it's still land under the ocean. It's right underneath the facility now, it's rock, essentially. Maybe a little bit out farther from that.
The foundation of the boathouse, you can help me out with that. It still water gets under it.
Correct.
So the bulkhead that we propose behind the boathouse is in the same resource area as in front. It's still land under ocean. So we're coming out further into the ocean, but we're still in land under the ocean.
Right.
So we haven't really increased any, but we've increased our location seaward.
Right.
Yeah.
We're further into it,
Right,
but we
so-
haven't increased the square footage, if you will.
Right. It is an alteration we should think about. I mean, your tidal flow will be changed from going under. At low tide, it is exposed, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an issue we should talk about. But let's go around the table. And Stan, do you have any comments or questions?
Just two things. When did we originally have the meeting for the emergencies?
Because of
First meeting in December,
So it's
First week of
a
December.
month and a half.
yeah.
And at the time, the engineer said it was imminent and it could go like that, and it was an emergency order, and here we are a month and a half later.
Well, we stabilized.
Yeah, I knew that was going to come up. So I'm going to bring you to a story, if that's all right, if we have some time. I think you guys probably remember the Fort Point Channel Tunnel in Boston in 2006, I believe. A concrete panel fell on a car going through and killed a person. The governor at that time asked for an emergency situation to investigate the remaining amount of panels. The remaining amount of panels that were on the ceiling, 242 bolt connections were found to be faulty. It took 1 year and $50 million to correct that problem. But without that investigation after the catastrophe, and the reason I'm pointing this out is, they reacted to a catastrophe. The rest of the panels, during the year that it took them to fix them, not one other panel fell during that time period. The catastrophe warranted the emergency. And here, I'm trying to avoid a catastrophe. We don't want to be reactionary in this situation. Just because it hasn't failed, meaning a catastrophe hasn't happened yet, doesn't mean we shouldn't act on what a structural engineer has indicated as a failed state.
Okay.
Okay, that's the reason we're proposing this, because I don't know when it will happen, but we have to look at that particular case and say, if they hadn't investigated the rest of those bolts based on that catastrophe, then they would have more catastrophes. So we're in a situation where we can avoid that.
All I'm saying is, the notice of intent could have been put together during this month and a half without under the emergency
Yeah,
condition, I guess.
Dawn, I'm sorry, that analogy is really a stretch. I mean,
It's not, no,
that's the
that's fine.
expressway.
That's fine, Brad, but we're taking responsibility for it. And our obligation, when we find something in a failed state, we have to propose to make reparations. Just like those engineers that did the inspection on the remaining bolts.
All I'm asking is, really, aren't we at a point where we have a notice of intent without having done any of the work?
No, because there's a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 bullet points of work that's been done. The silt boom had to be placed. That's been placed, that's work. It may not be that the steel sheets are being driven at this point, but there's a barge that's been mobilized, ready to do the work. There's also been a logistic issue that had to be ironed out between the two owners, because the Helfrich property is owned by two entities, not just Vin himself. And they had to come to an agreement financially as to who's going to be responsible. That took time. Also, ordering materials and getting a contractor, as easy as we thought it might be, it's not an easy route, which we were hoping would be different. So those are all elements of the project itself, but we still had to work and still should work under an emergency situation.
We did take steps to stabilize the structure itself. We put brackets on existing piles.
I guess my idea of an emergency with.
Yeah, but try to, I understand. Because I was,
I hear
as a layperson, I understand. It's not an emergency because the thing's standing up and sitting right there. But if a catastrophe takes place there, which it did in the tunnel, and that's why it is a good
No,
analogy.
I understand
Right?
that, but I'm saying a month.
It's not even close.
I'm saying a month and a
It's an
half ago,
expressway
we
with many
said that
thousands
could
of people
happen.
using that expressway.
Well, so the few people that use that channel, if that bulkhead fails and someone gets hurt on their vessel, is not important?
I think what Stan's saying, he's still wondering whether our emergency language applies. And I think that language speaks to public safety, not private property protection.
But
So here's my feeling, to make this not a very long argument. I think that the ship has sailed on whether we need to address this as an emergency or not. I agree, I feel strongly that it doesn't fit the language of our specific language, and that there should have been a notice of intent that was submitted. But I think we've gone past that. I think a lot of work has been done. I think a lot of people have come together to work on this, and so I think that's where we are today. But I don't agree that it applies. I think, you know, public safety is a big part of this. And, you know, you guys have known for a long time this had an issue. And so in my opinion, it should have been a notice of intent, not an emergency notice of intent.
Well, I have to disagree right there. We did not know that the vinyl sheet pile bulkhead was in failure until we came to you. The boathouse was known about well a long time ago. That's less of an issue in terms of public safety. I have a vinyl sheet pile bulkhead that's holding up 13 feet of material that is on a public channel. And if that fails, it's not going to be you that's going to have the problem. It's going to be the owner that's going to have the problem if that fails and it does hit a vessel.
It's set back from the channel, so I think, you know, we have a disagreement with this, Don. Absolutely, we have a disagreement with this. But I also think that a lot has happened. I think we're at a point where we want to try to find a way to make this get fixed in the next 2 months.
I guess I was just making a comment that, in my opinion, to me, an emergency is something has to be done immediately. But
That
that's.
doesn't happen even in the real world. It took a year for
I'm
them.
just saying, as a as you use the
I know,
term
but
as a
why,
lay.
so why can't you bend the other way? If you're bending towards it not being an
It was
emergency,
just a comment
it's not a comment.
from me.
I don't hear it as a comment.
I
It's
think,
not being delivered as a comment, it's being delivered through the chair as an issue where there's not gonna be an emergency issue. Now, as a stamped engineer, and who's claimed that as an emergency, and if it fails, it's not on you. It's on us, it's on the people that are out in the public.
But I heard our chairperson say that that's kind of behind us. Where are we? We are where we are now. We're doing on the emergency order. If I understood that right.
yeah, and I'd like the minutes to reflect my feeling that in the future, this type of project should be sent to us as a notice of intent, not as emergency repair. So please, let the minutes
In the
reflect
future,
that.
he says he's not coming
Yeah.
in this.
I think tonight what we should do is discuss the footprint and whether there are impacts to resource areas that could be either mitigated for or modified. I think we all realize we want this work to happen. It's contracted out, I believe, already. Yeah, so let's let the work happen in the next 2 months, and let's look at the resource area to see if there's something we can do to avoid.
I just did have one question,
Impacts.
because when we were there today, it was low tide, and that's a big barge out there. Is that gonna be a problem working that close to the building at low tide?
I don't think, I think they'll pull it to where Vinny had his dock, pull it up tight there, there's enough water there for the barge.
No, I'm just an observation.
John Rendon will probably have to weigh in on it, but yeah, we have to have a meeting with John to, because it will protrude into the channel, but it'll still be navigable.
Okay, that's all right.
John?
So I want to understand a little more about the trade-offs in the construction details. And first off, where in that, if you could point out to me on one of those plans where the overwash piles are going and where the piles are going to be installed so that the top of the pile is above mean high water or mean high water or whatever.
Sure. So the tallest bulkhead is going in front of the Helfrich property. That's going up to about 3 feet above the, 5 feet above the stain line. And if you look at the
5 feet
photographs.
above mean high water, in
Yes.
other words?
Yes.
Uh-huh,
And
okay.
then when we come over to this return that goes out in front of the boathouse, they're right in this corner, that will have to continue, and then we drop the elevation down to the actual height of mean high water right along here. And then also
So
right
you
in
call
front of
that
us.
an overwash pile or not? I mean,
Overwash bulkhead, yeah.
excuse me, bulkhead. But that will only overwash at tides that are higher than mean high tide.
And the reason for that is because just in talking with Bill, the material that was under the boathouse originally was not at the elevation it's at now. It was much higher. And so we're trying to
It's
keep
more
that
like at
material.
low tide now, low water roughly under there,
Yes.
or sloping up from low water or something.
And in order to retain any riprap that we put underneath that to dissipate wave energy, we need that bulkhead that high so that it doesn't pull material out. But we still want the flow to go over it during the high tides because we know we're in a V zone.
Right. And then continuing on
then-
from there.
Then this bulkhead here drops down to the elevation of this here, so same thing.
Mean high water.
Yep. Then this bulkhead here, the same thing, although we drop it down somewhere midpoint so that it follows the grade that's out there.
So that's, I mean, I understood at the site, it seemed to me what you were saying was that under the big building there, excuse me, on the north end of that building, it was really going to be at the grade line, which looked more like mean low water than mean high water.
Well, mean high water.
Mean high water.
Yeah.
It was low tide when we were there today, was it?
It was not completely
Or-
low, but it was,
Pretty
yeah,
low.
it was getting that way. I don't know exactly when low tide was.
Okay. So I guess, and the reason for having the overwash is for flow and to deal, so you're not diverting water during the rise and fall of the tide even. But then aren't you putting at risk some of the riprap that you're building up in there in order to?
Riprap won't go over the top of that.
Oh, I thought you said, oh, you're filling in the riprap on the western end of the northern part where it's going to be up higher?
No, the riprap is, we're adding riprap to replace that returned.
I'm sorry, I'm confusing terms. Where the bulkhead is going to be higher on the western side of that north face, you said it's going to change grade abruptly, or?
Oh, we talking about Helfrich's?
No, I'm talking about the north face of the
club.
Clam Bar building there.
Okay.
Oh, okay,
The north face of the Clam Bar building, where on the western edge of that north face, there's a chunk of concrete, which I took to be a piece of foundation.
Correct.
Which is undermined.
Right.
And where does a piling go there?
That sheet pile will be outward, seaward of that.
Height-wise,
That'll be high, mean high,
high.
and then that'll be filled with riprap
behind there.
behind it, yeah.
But then further out towards the channel on that wall,
It'll,
riprap is,
yeah, and then we're gonna add, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're talking about this wall that's right along this
well,
edge.
right.
On the underside of that, which would be under the building,
Yeah.
there was an existing riprap wall that was all the way down the whole length of that.
Poured concrete.
Concrete, right.
Well, there was poured concrete behind it.
But
Yeah,
what you could see
there was
there,
no,
riprap?
there was riprap, yeah, with poured concrete behind it, correct.
Right. So what we're proposing is to, once we get this sheet installed, to replace that riprap in the corner where you see the undermining, so that we dissipate any energy there, and then continue that riprap down along the back side of that wall, so that we don't, when flow comes in, we don't end up with a scour situation. And that riprap, just like we do out on, in Chatham, there's a bunch of steel sheet pile bulkheads out on the sound side, where there's riprap at the toe of those steel bulkheads, it dissipates the energy.
in Chatham.
Yeah, out off of, end of Cockle, no, not Cockle Cove, it's the other side, darn it.
Ridgeville? No, Cockle.
Yeah, we have a couple of steel sheet pile
Yeah, there
bulkheads.
is something called.
Yeah, in Cockle Cove Road, we're just replacing one there. But that's the reasoning behind the riprap, is that it dissipates the wave energy.
Okay.
And it's on the underside of the building, so you won't basically really see it, because the steel sheet will be higher than it.
Okay, thank you.
This is the channel.
Mark?
I really don't have any remarks, Brett.
One question I have, Waterways doesn't meet until the middle of February. Will a 30-day extension be of any value? We have to wait for Waterways' decision on this thing, so.
Not for the emergency, no.
No.
On the notice of intent.
Oh, okay, so the emergency is not contingent on.
I talked to John Vendone, and he said he was okay with the emergency work as long as they coordinated with him as far as when vessels were gonna be able to, or when the barge was gonna be working, so he could make sure people were getting in and out, and he did wanna make sure that there was no new structure seaward of where their existing
In the navigable
structure
part
is
of-
now.
Yeah.
Right.
So what you're proposing here doesn't encroach on any of the navigable waterways.
The plan you see, it does have one, I think that's why John brought it up. We're asking that that not be part of the emergency, that we'll eliminate that.
Along the channel side of
Yes.
the ballroom or whatever that is.
Yes,
there,
because
right?
we
On
can-
the east side of the,
We can
Yeah.
address that with the riprap along the backside of the wall that does go out along that side of the building, but stop it at the end of the building, so it doesn't go out into the channel.
And absent any sort of wall on the navigable side of that channel, is that going to maintain itself? I mean, isn't that riprap going to wash away? It's going to be exposed to the current coming both in and out, I would suspect.
But we'll make sure that we're using heavy enough rock that,
Just
gonna be laid
hope-
up right
pray
against
for-
the steel.
For hurricane, right? For a big storm.
well, if we have a hurricane between now and the time it's installed,
I guess some nor'easters would probably come in and run. So, that's the only other comment I've got is that, as you were talking today about that wall in the navigable section of that, I mean, I'm really struggling with that. I know you say that you have structural issues with the building, so you can't get the pile driver in close enough to put it
tight.
tight. Yeah,
Well, it's the overhang that's on the roof and the
I
size of the
understand.
hammer and.
yeah. So what you're suggesting is, there would be two alternatives. One would be to remove the roof and get it in tight where it,
Yeah, and we
Should be.
had thought of that, but that's a structural part of those glue lamp beams
Yeah, I know.
run outside of and that is the actual structure of
and there's no way to drive it.
cut that off and, see, it has a structural plank too. That whole system was put in with the glue lamp beams
Yeah.
and then structural 2x6, which is the actual ceiling in the club itself.
Yeah.
Runs that way also to be a,
That's, yeah, see, that's why I struggle with is, I mean, obviously, you could take it off if we required it, but, because otherwise you'd face an imminent collapse of the building if you didn't do the wall. But the alternative is to put the wall out farther, encroaching on the resource area, and that's,
That's right,
something
John.
which we don't like to see.
there is, yeah, and there's plenty of room there, but I can understand where John's coming from also. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to shrink that channel.
And there's no third option at all that you can come up with.
Tear the building down, start again.
Okay, there's three. Okay, yeah, another comment.
So, Amy, tonight, they're hoping to get an emergency extension, basically, right? And the after the fact, we would rule on later?
I would let Waterways have their, I mean, it's good, that's what I'm torn with too, because by the time it comes back anyways to Waterways or to us, most of this is gonna be done. So,
but also, because of the regulation, it has to go through waterways, you still really have to wait. But I think Brad alluded to it, isn't there something you might be considering in terms of mitigation for?
Right.
I think what I
That
need
was
to
what I
do
was
is, and I encourage everyone to do this, is look at the performance standards. There's going to be some alterations to land under ocean, potentially containing shellfish. And, we all received these materials a
Right.
day or two ago, and it's hard for me to really interpret what you're proposing for the changes, whether it should be something that's mitigated for. And ideally, we try to avoid impacts, but, you know, tonight, I don't know if we're going to come up with that, so.
And I agree with you that, I mean, if there are changes to the resource areas, now we are going alongside
Right.
the building and not underneath.
Right.
Some areas, that mitigation may be a requisite.
There was a shellfish survey when the pier was put in, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And not high densities, but there were some shellfish there. And so this could alter circulation, could alter sediment size, land in an ocean that could accommodate shellfish. So this, it's something we should pay attention to, as long as we can fit that in with the after the fact. I think that that's something I'd encourage everyone to really look closely. The performance standards are here. Take a look and see what you think about that. I don't have any suggestions on how to minimize them right now.
Based on the fact that it's an after the fact, I think that's my experience on after the facts. It's not the first one we've done, that is the board's opportunity to mitigate for something that had, usually the after the facts are violations. This is an after the fact under an emergency, but it's still got the same regulatory background, backing.
Right, we just, you know, we'd love to have a step where we minimize impacts
Yeah,
now.
I understand.
And it's happening quickly and work has to be done.
Can you maybe, so we did get a letter from Division of Marine Fisheries last minute, and also, I know you've been in conversations with Brendan, I think it was Chapter 91. So maybe you can just quickly highlight those conversations to let them.
I haven't talked to Division of Marine Fisheries. I think they have the same concerns you're expressing.
Yeah.
So we could deal with that at this level. But Brendan, who works under Dave Hill at Chapter 91, I spoke with him at quite length about the project. The Ben Hilfrich bulkhead will have to go through what's called a minor modification application, which is a letter. They usually approve them because most bulkheads, you have to go just outboard, and the 91 regulations allow that to a certain degree. We meet that certain degree according to Brendan, so he would handle that as a minor modification to the existing licensed vinyl bulkhead. The work along the boathouse and along the long building that goes along the channel, he would handle that as an emergency as well under the 91 regs, but he wants us to contact him the day before they start the sheeting in that location. So we're obligated to notify him with a letter. We'll copy you on that letter that we're starting that particular work. We're looking for a 91 emergency allowance.
Yeah, DMF does speak to potential of have a loss in shellfish habitat, and says may require mitigation at the state or federal level, so it may not only be at the local level.
So one of the things that strikes me about the DMF letter is there's no mention of winter flounder. I don't get that.
What was that, John? I'm sorry?
There's no mention of winter flounder. I thought Witchmere was winter flounder habitat, and here you are starting at the beginning of winter flounder season. What's the deal?
That's a very interesting observation, John. I think
Previous docks project.
maybe
Well,
Don has
there's-
some ideas.
Yeah, the degree of silt producing is usually the trigger for no work after January 15th. The driving of sheet piles in this location, that's probably why it's not triggering. If we were doing dredging
Yeah.
or a really high silt producing activity, then they would probably have mentioned that as a condition.
That's true. We had it for Allen Harbor, and the reason we had that was because it was dredging.
And if I could venture, they may be just accepting that it's an emergency process. It needs to happen because typically.
I think they would have acknowledged that in the
Typically,
letter.
they would put that in because it's a place that has lots of juvenile winter flounder a few months after this project will happen. They were born there, so I think, I'm not sure what we could do to condition it, but it sounds like, you know, Is there any sense to have, silt containment?
Yeah, that's
It's
installed
already
already.
in place.
We did that on purpose because of that factor that we thought might come up about winter flounder with our experience we had in Allen Harbor.
Yeah, it's interesting, left it out.
Silt containment should be in the entire duration of any in-water work anyways, so.
What's in there right now? I didn't see it. What type of containment?
It's a bottom anch and silk curtain
Yeah.
from Robert Hours.
Yep. Okay. Any comments from the audience? Okay, so we're going to have a chance to look at this in terms of whether there's impacts to resources and whether mitigation is warranted or not. I think we all need to do some homework to really look at what might happen for changes to habitats. So we can do that, we'll have time to do that.
So, the meeting, I think it might be the same night, that's the only thing that kind of stinks, is we overlap.
I think you're right.
February 19th is when both us and Waterways meet.
But their issues are going to be navigation, and I think our issues are really going to be focused on habitat alteration. So, we need to hear from them.
Yeah.
I mean, if we authorize emergency repairs, it can happen. Do you have to wait for Waterways?
Not on that.
No.
Yeah.
As long as we work with John Rendon.
Yeah, we can meet the same night, where you go to one first and then one the next, or you could, so that would be February 19th,
Yeah, we're filing for that date for Waterways.
or you'd be on for March 4th. for us.
Why don't we try to meet on both on that night? I'll just see if Matt can put us
Yeah.
where we can meet and then get here.
Once the work is done, Amy, we're just
Right.
going to go back and look at it, so it doesn't really matter when we rule on the notice of intent, the after the fact. So, yeah, I don't know if there's any big rush.
So do we want to do it so that we have that input from Waterways so
I
that,
think, we had a joint meeting, we had a meeting with the harbor master and natural resource director on bylaw changes, and we really did talk about how we request input, we want input from them anyways, we really want more input in front of writing and not just kind of he said, she said type information, so we could do it, I mean, we don't have to rush it on the 19th, we could put it on March 4th for these two.
Yeah, it's likely to happen, and I think it's important that we really look at
Yeah.
these performance standards and see what goes in and see how it might impact habitat.
I also want to let them have their say, though, they are supposed to.
Right,
So.
right. I think they'll focus on navigation, that's my guess. Any other thoughts or concerns with the process we're talking about?
4th is okay? They're saying that March 4th is okay.
Okay.
For these two hearings.
Yep.
yeah.
In the meantime, I'd like to, I'll talk to John, but I think it might be worth us all sitting down together prior to
Totally agree.
starting this
Mhm.
in the next week or so.
Okay,
Can we do that?
yes,
Just I want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
okay.
And I would say, Don, when you come back, if you can have, square footage of alterations, what was there before and something we can work with, like that'd be helpful. I think people would like us to vote. I think last time we did not, and it was approved, I think, the town staff.
You gave me your authorization to approve the emergency certification.
Not by a vote. we
Not
did.
by a vote,
Yeah.
but.
No, we kind of
Yeah.
gave
Told me to
our
do it.
support.
Yeah,
I mean, I
a
would
non-
love
a
for
non-
your
A
support.
non-consensus.
Well, this is the notice of intent that gonna be done on March 4th, so this is really a continuance then, right?
No, this would be an emergency.
Granting of an emergency
Yes.
certification tonight, or authorizing me to sign off on that for you.
Right.
And continuing this till March 4th.
Right. So, I think that's the way it should go. So if somebody would like to make a motion to that end?
I'll make a motion to approve of Amy's authorizing, what? An emergency certification
Certification.
for 23 and 33
Snowing.
Snowing Road.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second it, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 in favor, none opposed. Good luck.
Thanks.
Oh, we gotta vote on the continuance of the special thing, remember?
Oh,
Continue,
okay, I move that we continue the hearings for the after-the-fact notice of intent for 33 Snowing Road and 23 Snowing Road, Richmond Harbor Club, emergency repairs to existing boathouse accessory structure until
March 4th.
March 4th.
Second.
Seconded by John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, that seat's hot.
That's a good one. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a request for amended order of conditions for Richmond Harbor Club, 23 Snowing Road. Proposal to reconfigure the pools, patios, and relocation of the coastal bar.
Good evening. For the record, Sean Riley, Coastal Engineering. With me at the table is Tom O'Cahey from Hawk Design. We've got Mike and Bill from the Witchmere, and Andrew Singer, attorney, and Dave Hawk in the audience as well. I'm covering tonight for Dave McNevich, who could not be here, unfortunately, and he put me in the hot seat tonight. So I know that you all had a number of requests for information and had some questions. We provided you with a supplemental packet with information that should address a number of those questions. One thing I do want to give you that Dave recognized after the fact is that the calculations that he gave you for the coverage calculations was everything that was within the limit of work, which also included areas that were outside of the buffer zone. So I'd just like to provide you with an updated.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to the town planner today to us in Charlotte, it's not the entire site, it's just conservation jurisdiction.
Right. So if you look at the handout I just gave you, at the bottom section of that is the areas within conservation jurisdiction for building coverage, the amenities coverage, and then the total coverage. And most notably, the result is a reduction of 3,571 square feet of what we're calling site coverage. That does not include any of the synthetic areas, which we'll get into a discussion about in a little bit. We've also provided within that packet the comparison of the infiltration rate between the synthetic turf areas and turf lawn. And essentially, the turf areas, the synthetic turf, are approximately 8 times more pervious than your typical turf lawn. And that's because the synthetic turf itself can essentially handle almost 50 inches per square foot of infiltration, and sand is the limiting factor. So these areas can infiltrate pretty much what any of the beach areas can infiltrate. because it's essentially sand that it has to go through to get to the subsurface. So that results in a greater recharge within these areas, and also limits any potential runoff or erosion from these areas. It should also be noted that we are proposing a reduction in the turf lawn in the amount of $23,000. And let me just get to my sheet. Over 23,000 square feet of lawn. We provided a calculation for the, what we calculated for the nitrogen reduction, and it was approximately 125 pounds of nitrogen per year with the reduction of that turf lawn area. A question was raised about the volume of the swimming pools, and we have a reduction in the volume of a combination of the swimming pools and spa from approximately 195,000 to 163,500 gallons. At the very end of the packet, what we provided there is basically the Rawls rate, which comes right out of the stormwater handbook for the infiltration rates that we use for those particular soils. Your typical loam, your topsoil, which there's 6 inches in these turf lawns, is about 1.02 inches per hour, where the sand is 8.27 inches per hour, and that's where we get the approximately 8 times more effective infiltration rate for the sand areas. There were some questions about the durability of the product of the synthetic lawn, and Tom has brought with him basically a full packet of all of the different clients that are using this. It's used essentially throughout the country. It's been used for quite a while. It's a good soft alternative that's very durable for high traffic areas, of which this is, that also yields a high infiltration rate and gives the aesthetic of lawn without having the negative impacts that fertilizers for those lawns can yield in embayments, as we know. And as designers, we're often looking for any other kind of soft solution that we can propose as an alternative that's more environmentally friendly, and this seems like the best choice. And most notably, at a project that you probably all have seen, do you have the board? Or heard of, if not have been there, is the Encore Casino in downtown Boston. And they've installed over 50,000 square feet in the waterfront area at their resort for that reason. The infiltration rate, it's highly durable, aesthetically pleasing, and environmentally friendly. As far as the questions for the leaching, any leaching of chemicals, we've got reports that actually included, as you know, some of these in the football stadiums, you see they put the rubber pellets in. Those reports included the infiltration through those rubber pellets. We're not putting in rubber pellets, we're not proposing rubber pellets, we're proposing sand infill. So even with the rubber infill, they found that there is de minimis environmental effects of this product. And that included leaching through that rubber material, and we're going to be infilling with sand.
These copies provided for the commission to
They
hold
are.
on to?
They are.
Okay.
Yep, I believe there was two copies.
I'd like to spend some time.
Yep. And with that, we'll get into the plantings. There were some questions about the plantings, modifying the planting plan, and the California privet, which Dave will address in a minute. But with that, we'll open up to any questions you may have on what I've provided you. drivability of the two sites. Yeah, we don't need it, yeah. I think they get the point with the using and the durability. I mean, there's plenty of sites around the country that are essentially using this product on the waterfront as a durable surface for people to gather, highly durable, that's right on the waterfront.
Okay. I will say, this report, I think, is going to be really valuable. It's done by a good environmental firm in New England, and there's probably a lot in there that we should try to absorb and think about.
I can make it electronically available too. I can scan it in, or I'm sure you guys can get it to me electronically too.
Okay. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, a couple of things. So we did just get that information, so.
Yep.
Minus needing to review all that, I think, I mean, a major concern of mine was, you know, making sure that we're not getting rid of one problem and potentially causing another. I'm sure the wind tree doesn't want that either. So I would like to be able to review that additional material. Since we met last year, we had a kind of roundtable discussion with the other department heads in town hall who are gonna look into this. And we talked about basically what is coverage, and that was the crux of it. And what I would recommend to you for conservation is not to get really bogged down in maybe what a planning term is in terms of coverage, but just look at how would you treat this. It's not natural, but so I would equate it as similarly as possible as to that of maybe a very pervious patio in terms of how we would categorize it, if you will. But that being said, it is covering highly manicured lawn area. We would typically require mitigation for those things, and we can talk about that. I don't know if mitigation would be in the typical ratios that we would normally require, because we are trying to, the whole reason behind this is the commission's condition that they substantially reduce or eliminate chemicals. So I think maybe we could talk about mitigation, and I would not recommend, I would say that there's potentially a very large benefit here after reviewing of this material, that maybe you wouldn't require the same level of mitigation as typical. So you are, with this product, you're reducing 27,800 something square feet of treated lawn area. That's big. But again, I want to review that information. I'm sure you do too before I endorse it definitively, I would say. Okay? Last meeting, we talked a little bit about certain plants in the landscaping plan. I had a chance to chat with David Hawk as well on the phone about that. It is a mix of natives and ornamentals. My only hesitation with some of the ornamentals was making sure that they're not going to need or chemical application to keep them going. David did ask, by a one-time natural or organic upon installation, which a lot of plants we do that anyways. It's a one-time initial fertilization of organics, but after that, none. David can speak more about some of the ornamentals they've chosen, I'm sure, if you want to, such as the privet or hydrangeas, things like that. But they are aware that they're not going to be allowed to fertilize these plants, so they should pick plants that aren't going to need that. We talked about pool drawdown. There is enough stormwater capacity or system or capacity in the stormwater system to accommodate for that, but our typical condition for everybody always has been that it should be removed off-site and disposed of properly if it's drawn down. That's certainly something we can talk about.
Just to clarify, you mean emptied? There's a typical drawdown recycle process that happens. If you're talking about empty.
We haven't discriminated in
Okay.
other conditions. We just say if any pool water is to be removed, it has to be taken off-site. And typically that is because, and it's happened on Snowing Road, not on your property, but you know, I come out and I see somebody's literally got a hose going into Winchmere Harbor with their pool water. So And like, not at all you, but
Yep.
that's the reason we have it, because we don't want discharging. So, that's all the comments I have now.
Thanks, Amy. Stan?
I don't have anything at this point.
Okay. John?
Yeah, so, I think it's great that you guys are pursuing getting rid of, what was it, 27,000 square feet?
28,000 square feet.
28,000. I have yet to be convinced that artificial turf is the right answer. And I have a specific question about this Sin-Lawn product, and it's interesting that, you know, we get this, what is it, 50, 60-page report at the meeting. Would have been nice to have had some time to review it beforehand. But specifically, silver-based compounds are used as antimicrobial for synthetic turf of this sort, and it's a little hard to tell from the Sin-Lawn material. There's nothing about that in this material. If you go to the web page for the particular product, Sin Augustine X47, they have some product detail, and under an item called features, they list various features, amongst which are something that's referred to sanitized R, as in registered trademark antimicrobial. And I believe that to be a silver-based compound. The interesting thing about this investigation of leaching stuff is there's a whole section which you very helpfully pulled out to show us about metals leaching into bleach water, but they don't analyze silver content. It's other heavy metals. So I worry about that and what the deal is with this antimicrobial stuff that uses silver compounds to fight against microbes. I assume it's for mold or something.
Right. So that antimicrobial that you're referring to, it's not actually part of the product. That's something that you can choose to add to it. Like it mix in with the infill.
Oh, so that's not on
It's
the
not.
polyethylene stuff?
No, it's not.
I see.
What is on it is the Envirolock plant-based backing system. So on the back of this, it uses a biopolymer. It's like a sugar cane. So if you feel the back of this, it kind of feels like it has a glue coating to it, and that's the sugar cane coating. That's the Envirolock. It's the whole
Okay,
system.
great.
So we could condition chemical applications to the turf?
Yeah, I think clearly chemical applications would be different
Yeah.
from what would be used for natural turf. But yeah, we probably shouldn't do that. I don't know. I'll be interested to
Yeah.
read this a little more closely.
If there was a situation, a maintenance issue, like if a child got sick or had an accident or something like that, what the manufacturer recommends is that the waste or mess be removed with a power vac and then be disinfected with an appropriately diluted, like simple grain cleaning product.
Right.
That's environmentally safe.
You would think you'd have to have that type of maintenance at some point with this material. Mark?
The permeability rating on that product is pretty impressive. The sanitation issue that you raise is a concern. I guess my biggest concern with the whole thing is the actual longevity. There's a degree of question in my mind that being a sugarcane-based product, that has to be biodegradable. Why isn't it going to deteriorate, and why wouldn't it permit that to come apart as time progresses? So, I mean, there needs to be some preventative measure to not have an adverse impact from the breakdown?
Everything has a lifespan.
Of course.
So, you know, at the point where, obviously at the Witchmere, at a point that's probably a lot sooner than other places, that would be taken up, recycled, and a new one placed in there. So I don't think it would get to the point where they'd let it get, you know, to the point where it would start biodegrading and falling apart and being tracked or moving around. They'd want this to look like it was new. So it could be removed, recycled, and replaced. So
Typically based off of sun exposure. I think I spoke about this last time. You have like 20 to 30 years based off of our conditions in this region for color fading. And typically that's that's the main reason why this product gets replaced, is because of color fade.
which is the aesthetic.
Which is the aesthetic. And then at that point, it would be replaced and recycled and repurposed as a new product, fully, the fibers and the backing.
So you're saying there's no deterioration from a wear point where things could start?
Not for this use. An athletic field would be different because there's more wear and tear. A high traffic purpose.
I guess I find it hard to believe that there can't be some deterioration over time. And how would you measure? I mean, how would you know? I mean, I can understand when you talk about a 20 or 30-year lifespan, but that doesn't mean that it just stops.
Right, no, that's when they typically replace it due to the color fade. The product itself is still intact.
So there's no deterioration
Correct.
of any other sort, you're saying?
One thought there, Stan, is you could condition this application to have some type of maintenance that would be, have a frequency to try to identify if it was shedding material and have some cleaning. So that could be an option too.
As far as, I know there was a lot of talk last time with the sample being passed around and fibers being pulled. It does have an ASTM test rating for grab tear strength, and when installed, they're on 15-foot wide rolls, so it's not, and it had, the edges are finished and nailed down. The average grab tear strength has to be greater than 200 pounds. So if you were to go to one of these athletic fields or where it was installed, you'd have to get down on your hands and knees and have a greater grab tear strength than 200 pounds to be able to significantly do anything.
Any thoughts? I just want to see if Mark was done.
Yeah, I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask just an overall question? It seems like maybe to move some of this along, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of questions on the hardscape portions, but maybe there are.
Yeah, there's a couple.
So I was just trying to funnel where our comments are, but if you have some, that's fine.
Well, I'm going to look to Ernie, but I think my thoughts are due diligence on product, and this report's going to help us all there. And then I'm going to come back to the question on hardscape interpretation after Ernie.
Yeah, the only question I would have, and I'll read this, I think it'd be interesting to read, but I think this goes to the environmental effect of this product. But the other question I would have is maintenance. Is it, you just
Zero maintenance.
lay it and forget it?
Yeah, for the most part.
No issues with mold or anything like that that you have to treat on a regular basis? No? Okay.
Well, you did say you could vacuum it, you could hydro vacuum it.
Depending on,
If something came up.
100-year storm, a lot of sand gets put on it,
Right.
It can power back it out.
Or discovery of a shedding that was undesirable, so that could be a
Yeah.
condition.
It's a miracle product, really.
Yeah.
Seagulls?
Again, they're using this around the country, and they've been using it for a long time, so.
But, no, just in terms of cleanliness.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm sure you could power wash it.
seagulls land there, fly over, and, I mean, presumably it's gonna have to be cleaned from time to time, not
Right.
just
Right.
because there's an accident, but because it's out there in the open, and seagulls and coyotes, and
Yeah, I
Who
would,
knows who's gonna be leaving stuff on
I
there?
think to that end, I mean, I assume Winchmere will have some sort of a maintenance program for this.
Pre-season.
So, I mean, that would be helpful to have, if you could specify that.
I mean, it does get used, dog park applications, and typically, for, you know, that type of application, they would just use irrigation or a hose bib to wash away the mess, but, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be the case here.
Yeah.
I think the power vac and disinfecting, there could be an irrigation application to it.
I just have one other comment, but, you know, if we're going to go with this, if we're getting to the point where we're thinking of agreeing with this, I think one of the conditions would be that any changes, like, you might decide in 5 years that you want to do something different, or these guys come out with a product that's even better, and you want to rip this up and put in something different. I think we should just condition that any changes need to come before us.
Yeah, that's not unexpected, I think, to have that. So what's the timing for when you would like to do this?
Because project, it's October, after October's.
Okay, so I guess we want to look into the information we have. The question I had on interpretation of hardscape coverage, and you may not want to answer this, but you've got lots of applications where it's been used.
Mhm.
Do you know if other conservation commissions have interpreted this to be hardscape or had some pro-rated mitigation approach? Is that something that you're aware of?
It's nothing that we're aware of, but I mean, I would equate it to an area that is covered with wood chips or mulch. It has pretty much the same environmental benefit or negative aspect to it. It really doesn't have any benefit other than the infiltration rate.
Right.
Lawn, what benefit does that have? Well, it doesn't. It has a negative benefit, which is the nitrogen that brings to it. It also, you know, it has some root uptake, but, you know, what we look to mitigate are things that we find detrimental.
Right.
So I guess, to me, you'd have to find a detriment to try to mitigate it. I mean, mitigation is just that. It's to mitigate something that's bad.
Right. It's interesting. We're asking you to do something to reduce the nitrogen loading, and this meets it. At the same time, you do have some ecological benefits to grass. You have microbes, you have things happening that are alive. So it's something I'm curious what other people have asked for. I agree with Amy that you would not even consider a 3-to-1 mitigation for this type of thing because there's benefits here. You're reducing nitrogen loading substantially. So I guess we'll just look into that, look into what other conservation commissions have done to think about this, and just pursue that option as well.
I would just want to remind you, as you're reading that report, that most of these studies were conducted back in the early 2000s, and they were conducted because of the rubber crumb infill.
Right.
Because there was a concern about the rubber and the leaching that the rubber has. So most of these studies are conducted and geared towards that. So just be mindful that we're using a natural sand infill.
Yeah.
And not the rubber.
Okay, so are there any studies on this product in that report?
So on the rubber, on this,
Sand
for
instead
the
of
sand?
rubber.
No.
Okay.
But the way the stormwater was sampled is they're athletic fields, 3 of them, and there's a trench drain that circles the field, and then you have the track. So the water was collected through the trench drain, so it had to surface through our turf and the rubber crumb, and then that's how they collected the data.
Did a comparison.
Sean?
If I can jump into it, I mean, understandably, what we heard at the last meeting is that there's concerns, and understandably, because it's a brand new product and something you haven't seen before, and something that was fairly new to us. So in part of our doing our due diligence and talking about referencing and trying to understand it better and also get articulated to you, that was our goal in sharing, one, the commercial resume, and showing us how wide it's being used around the country. And then if you look at that commercial resume, including who we've done the due diligence, I mean, Fenway, we pulled up the word, if you don't mind, if you mind. not in a resource area, but when you look at the litany of large corporations and well-known companies that are in support of using this product, it doesn't mean that you need to be in support of it. It just means to suggest that there's a lot of companies out in the country, from Google, The Gap, Fenway, who's got 15,000 square feet up on top. There's a lot of organizations like that, Harvard. So municipalities, it's a very long list that you can take a look at. And gives us confidence in knowing that if we're going to choose a product like this over doing something else like grass, we feel good about it, but obviously everybody's got to feel good about it. But our goal in trying to illustrate this is to share that there are a lot of companies out there, large companies, not new, that have gotten behind this and that are referenced for having it in place for 4 or 5, 6 or 7 years, that feel very confident we do it all over again.
Yeah, thank you.
And for the record, that was Mike Charlotte from the Witchmere speaking.
Thanks.
I just have one other comment about this, if I might, which is that we're being presented here with 2 choices. Existing conditions or an artificial lawn. And the 2 choices are, the primary reason that I see for those being the 2 choices is the specific aesthetics of the Witchmere Harbor Beach Club. And I don't know that that's so much of a concern of mine is your aesthetics. And I think that a preferable solution would be a natural one that used natural plant material. Because, I mean, the one downside of the turf lawn is all the chemicals you feel you need to put on the turf lawn to maintain it to your aesthetic standards and to have cars driving on it. And so I would still like to see you guys considering a completely natural solution, not one that requires a manufactured product which, aside from the wide use that you are establishing, it has met. I'm still not confident that doesn't mean there isn't a downside. And for Cape Cod in particular, where the resource here is so fragile and so at risk, I just have a little bit of a hard time swallowing the idea that we're going to roll out something they use in Fenway Park right at the water's edge here in Harwich. It just rubs me the wrong way, and I'm not convinced you guys have really looked hard into completely natural, plant-based alternatives here.
On that note, would the commission feel compelled to approve the project if we replaced all of the synthetic areas with Players Best, the natural grass?
That's what we approved for the wedding lawn
Yes,
area?
yes.
Well,
It's a natural, Dave can speak to it if you'd like,
That was the one.
in lieu of this material. I know it's going to take a lot for you to wrap your head around this. The applicants advised me that they're looking to try to get a vote tonight, and I'd like to work through all of the other issues, if you have any other issues. But that aside, if we were to take this off of the table literally and in those areas, use the Players Best grass.
so since I brought this up, I just want to clarify what your question is. I mean, if you're asking me would I feel better about that, the answer is absolutely yes. Whether we're going to vote tonight to approve that, I think that's a completely different.
I guess my question is, are you comfortable with those areas being, would the commission be comfortable with those areas being the Players Best, and would we move on to other issues?
But I thought the
Could I
play-
just, maybe you don't even need to say it's Players Best, maybe you just say, well, you're not allowed to fertilize, apply chemical treatments. It doesn't necessarily have to be this proprietary blend, but it could be you could do, just as long as you don't chemically treat the area. I don't know if we have to necessarily say it has to be Players Best or not. But
I
could
thought
be.
the whole issue there was you were testing if that was going
Right.
to work or not. I mean, you were doing that area as a sample to see if it was going
Bigger
to work
test
or not.
area?
You mean this here?
No, the
Players Best.
Oh, yes.
We were told that it was going to be, that 8,000 square foot wedding lawn area was going to be kind of a test area for the product. You're saying now that you'd be amenable to testing it at a larger scale.
What we're trying to, Andrew Singer, what we're trying to, as you know, we have several regulatory hurdles. You know, we're scheduled planning and zoning next week, and there are various issues we've talked about with everybody. And what the applicant's trying to do is address the requests that you've made in a way that is as exponential as possible. And clearly, while everyone on this side of the table feels that turf, you know, would be a very good solution here, many members of the board don't, or they have concerns with it. And so the request that Sean just made is that, and maybe go with Amy's suggestion, what we'd be asking for tonight is if there are other, we answer or can answer all your other questions, if instead of the turf, that will be a natural lawn area with no fertilization and chemical treatment as a condition, will that be something that tonight you're ultimately willing to vote for so we can proceed, and then the turf just synthetic?
Yeah. Well, no, it's a really interesting option. I think I would like to see that something put down in writing that would say that it was not going to receive any chemical applications, any fertilizer.
Will that be a condition in your order of conditions?
Yeah.
You normally would put that kind of a condition in yourself.
Well, yeah,
Well,
you
it's
guys.
already in there. It's already in the order of conditions, telling them they either have to do that or come back with an alternative that we approve of.
Right.
And so it's already in the order of conditions. I don't know that we would need to even vote on that.
Well, what you would need to vote, the layout, the design that's before you is different than the layout you approved last year. That's where you would need a vote, because it's a physically different layout.
Okay, so is there an increase in the area that would be turf lawn in the new plan relative to what it is now?
No.
If that were the
No,
alternative?
there'd be a 3,500 square foot decrease.
It's a 3,500 square foot decrease in coverage, and it's a 17,000 square foot decrease in lawn.
Right.
Because the area of the synthetic was about 10,000 square feet, and we're removing 27,000 square feet of lawn, so the difference, the net would be a 17.
I can't imagine why you wouldn't.
Well, I'm just curious why you held that one back. I mean,
Yeah,
did you-
Because we really want to try this product, but
Oh,
Well,
I
that's,
see.
well, that's why I said,
But more
I'm
importantly than wanting to
confused,
try
why
the
would you?
project, we really want an approval.
Right, right.
So that's why.
Nothing saying that you couldn't come back, I mean, go through all the other boards
and then take the time to really delve into this
The turf could be
topic.
a future project.
I'm interested in you seeing, you apply the turf at some point. At some location, I think it'd be interesting. But maybe,
Could we make a suggestion to that point then?
Yes.
If the board is otherwise willing to do it, these two panels could be turf. That could be your test case right there. And everything else would be the no fertilization, it would be alive with no fertilization and no chemical treatment. And I think Sean's got the same board.
It's 1,100 square feet, 550 and 550.
And where are those located?
They're on the, essentially adjacent to the deck.
I know, where's the water?
Water's right here, the beach is right here.
Yeah, okay. So it's closest area to the beach.
so you folks actually favor this type of turf as opposed to the synthetic? That's your preference? You,
Maybe I'll talk to that. Dave Hawk.
We're gonna get everybody involved.
We have the product that we feel is going to be the best, but what the commission has come back to us and said, hey, we need to get rid of fertilizers. So as far as being in the pool area, with that type of function, permeability,
The durability,
yeah, the durability, I mean, the durability is great. I've been doing, we used to call it AstroTurf when I started. This has come a long way. We've got testimonials here. It's really grown into a unique product. We're using it at apartment complexes. We're using it at homes. You saw at Encore, 50,000 square feet, and that is stuck out in the water. That is around a resource. It abuts the resource area. And that's the city of Boston. So, I take a look at this and I said, I think this is the best product for what we're trying to create out there. Because we're taking a lawn that eats the nitrogen, we're replacing it with a synthetic lawn. So we don't have those issues here. It's a confined space. It's a pool area. We've added more planning. We've got 16,000 square feet of planning space as opposed to the existing 2,600. So that's why we recommend it. We believe in this product. We use it. We're currently using it for projects that we have, and we just felt that this was the right fit.
So that is your preference then? Okay. So, moving on that, I would like to have a little bit of time to review these materials, the new materials, and look in the question of if other jurisdictions have considered this to be increases in hardscape. And so, if you guys want to continue until a certain time to do that, that would be fine with me. If you want to move on to putting turf down, then, you know,
If you were doing the turf solution, the natural turf solution, I forget what the product is called, but
Players best.
Players Best, when would you be doing that?
Obviously,
The work's still gonna be the same, the work time schedule's still gonna be the same, but this is a very long lead time redevelopment, and so we're trying to keep the schedule, and again, that may or may not be your concern, but we're trying to, move this along with the meetings that have been scheduled. And so, while what Dave said is accurate, that the turf was, walking in here, and still is the preferred solution. If the committee tonight is willing to vote in approval with a condition that, except for maybe those two panels that we talked about, 1,100 odd square feet, everything else be, and we can't use the word turf lawn, a live lawn, for lack of a better term, with the no fertilization condition, we would prefer and ask that you vote on that to approve tonight. So even though it's maybe not our preference, it's something we're happy to live with. And so if that's something the board's willing to do, if there are no other issues, and we haven't heard any significant other issues, you could vote approval that everything would be alive, except for those two panels down on the deck, and that with the conditions that, there'd be maintenance, there'd be no fertilization, everything that Amy mentioned. If that would be something the committee would do, we'd ask you to do that this evening.
Any other issues that you can see with,
No, there'd be a reduction
Right.
and as long as they, we condition that they don't treat it, it'll be a net improvement. I don't see any reason why you couldn't move forward with that tonight with Players Best or just a natural lawn. I want to say I'm not necessarily, we just got a lot of information tonight, and I realize that a lot of people who are probably more versed in it than myself or anybody, here has really vetted it, but, the commission did just receive information tonight, so to expect us to review stuff on synthetic lawns tonight, and when you've just given us a bunch of new information isn't really.
Oh, no, I think that's very fair, and so I think, and I'm not sure one of you up there, I think, suggested it. If you are, since we do believe it would be an improvement,
Yeah. And it may
to
be,
approve it tonight
and
with
I
the
hope it
grass
is.
and the panels, we can always come back for another amendment.
You can, yep.
Which would be the turf, and I think it would take the pressure off on both sides, because we can be proceeding with the redevelopment itself, and the one issue that is, you're looking at seriously, you would have time to look at it, and we can decide to come back. And frankly, I have a feeling the applicant would come back, but this would let us be moving forward on the parts. Everything else really isn't controversial.
Yep. I would recommend approval.
well, thanks, Amy. Your site coverage reduction in nitrogen, would it be the same? Would it be the 125 pounds per year?
That's correct.
Yeah. That's what we're looking for, really. I was almost looking forward to looking into the question on the synthetic stuff, just to learn more, but
You still
Well,
can.
they're gonna
Well,
come
no,
back.
I think you still should.
I think you should, yeah, I seriously think you should, because we,
And can I say one more thing, because Mr. Ketcher brought up, can you pull up the National Harbors, which is along the Potomac, and right a bunch of historic sites, the board, yeah. If anybody was meant to illustrate a high profile.
Was it this one here?
Not in the water, National Harbor, that one right there, yeah, exactly. So they installed 5,000 square feet, they're directly on the water and resource area, 5 or 6 years ago. National Harbors, we vetted it with their area vice president, and they would do it 100 times over again. And again, the pictures illustrate exactly where it is directly along the Potomac. So we tried to reach out to many areas that were in the resource. You can't do that from everybody, but we tried to the last meeting, this one, to get as much as we could for you and for ourselves.
I just have one question, and I'm not opposed to have those two sample panels, but why would you? It's not like the wedding lawn that we needed to see if it was gonna grow or not. I mean, this stuff, I mean, a short term, you're not gonna be able to test it and find,
Well, the straight up answer,
Yeah.
and Mr. Ketchum is gonna say probably that he doesn't necessarily agree, is that the owner would like those two panels to be green instead of deck, and the alternative, they'd be deck.
Aesthetics.
If they're not green, they're gonna be, they have to be a deck because of where they are.
Right.
They're on the other side of that wall, so it's a resource. So to stay as a deck, this would allow it to be green and would allow the, you know, as a sample. So it's aesthetics, to Mr. Ketchum's point.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so remind me exactly what we're ruling on. We're ruling on the site coverage changes and,
The amended, or the plan as amended,
yep,
with the exception that with only the seaward two little areas on the deck be synthetic turf, and the rest be just natural lawn
okay. And can
and
we,
plantings.
and so we already have a notice of intent and an order on this,
Yeah, this is an amendment.
right? So for the amendment, we want to add any additional monitoring to the player's best or the new material than what's already there now? It'd be great to, you know, look at this a couple of years down the road, and make
see
sure
why
the
not.
player's best is doing well
Yeah.
without fertilizer.
Yeah, I mean, an annual monitoring report would probably be, at the end of season, would be a good
How long?
idea. We, or at least for the life of the permit, but
Just 3 years.
longer, you could do ongoing conditions with a certificate of compliance for an annual monitoring report to be submitted, so.
Well, but I suggest why don't you just do I would do the 3 years, because it's an alive product, you'll know about that.
I was gonna say, you're gonna be monitoring, because if it doesn't look good, you're gonna wanna come back
Right.
before us
Before
with
you.
something else.
That's true.
Okay.
Let me
I would
draft
think
some
we
language
can
for
put some-
monitoring.
Okay.
You want to find out how it's doing now.
Well, yeah, but they'll be letting us
Right.
know.
Well, I
Well,
will.
If it's
we'll
doing
have
well, we
more-
want to see that too.
Right.
All right, you convinced us. Well, I'd move that we support the proposed amendment to the order for 23 Snow Inn Road to reconfigure pools, patios, relocation of coastal bar, application of player's best sod, and 2 experimental panels of synthetic sin lawn
Second.
with
I'm sorry?
modifications for monitoring that Amy's going to develop as discussed.
Is player's best, is that a sod?
Yes.
Supposed to be specific,
No,
like
just-
that.
just-
Not specific.
Players best or similar.
Or similar.
Right.
That requires no chemical
No
applications or
I
fertilization.
would say natural lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Seconded by Mark.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the homework on this.
You know,
Don't throw it away.
I would say, yeah,
Can I have that?
Yeah, Mark.
I would love that, and I'll make this electronic for you.
Yeah.
yeah, natural lawn, because we're gonna have to put something in that doesn't require nitrogen to survive, or brown, so, well, it's gonna be one of those
Yeah, unless you want it. you
players
can
best,
do it on the
or
same
something
way.
Oh,
similar.
something similar, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, yeah, whatever, I'll take it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I wish Jim was here.
Oh,
He's really
perfect.
kind of tuned in on this issue.
You're gonna wanna potentially come back before this even happens
So it's color on this magazine.
on the order.
Well, we have a camera
And
there.
that's okay, because then we're going to look into the things we said we're going to look into.
Right, right.
And I would want to know if there was any mitigation requirement in other jurisdictions.
Oh, no,
Because it's like-
I'm glad we did this, because they're saying they needed to take the pressure off of their timetable.
I'm just
and
so
our
curious
pressure.
why this option didn't come up much earlier.
I think it was sort of implicit in their earlier request.
That's when I
They sort of said, well, you know.
Don't forget your sample this time. I really enjoyed
That's when I
having
looked
it.
at you and I said, I'm confused, because why are we even talking about this if that's the option?
Because they want to use the Zoom.
I have quite a few strange things in the office that only added.
I imagine they're thinking it's, in the end, it's cheaper.
Yeah, no little maintenance cost.
Over 25 years.
Oh, it's gonna be, I think the natural lawn is gonna be significantly less money initially. And even when you weigh out the installation versus the upkeep cost, where you've taken away any applications, you've cut your costs significantly. So, you know, monetarily, I think they're probably ahead of the game.
Are you familiar with this place?
With the natural turf.
Are you familiar with that, though, Mark?
I would think
What's
there'd
that?
have
The
to be
natural
some
turf?
kind
I
of
mean,
That particular
maintenance,
one, no,
you
and
know?
I've got some concerns about that. Amy looked at me when she said natural lawn, and that, I'm not
Yeah.
100% sold on the language. I need to think about that, but
I just meant not as, didn't have to
understood,
be
right,
the player's best definitively. It could just
right.
be
Yeah, I understand exactly what you
lawn
mean.
that's not chemically treated.
Right.
My only concern is that knowing the standards that Winchmere has to
Right.
maintain their properties, the
I know what you're saying.
application of fertilizer, you know, I think
You're
it's just too much of a,
Well, I think in general, for the entire project, I think we've got to look at the conditions very carefully in a number of areas.
I would love to see this work, the synthetic lawn.
I
If
like the
if
idea of
worked,
it,
I'd
but-
love to see him use it there.
It's I already started to look at a couple things, and there's some other concerns as far as sanitary issues and so
I
forth.
was gonna say, there's gotta be some kind of maintenance program with it. He made even the comment of, well, if there's a hurricane, you get sand on it. Well, the winds in the winter.
Well, that's true, but I mean, the reality is, everything that lands on it is gonna get washed through, right? I don't care whether it's from a dog or a goose or
Seagull.
Oh, yeah, you think?
whatever it is.
You think the goose is gonna wash through? It's not gonna wash through, it's gonna sit there.
There'll be no chemical
And sit
alterations
there
like with the lawn,
and sit
where some
there.
of it's taken up or processed.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. At least the natural turf would
Eventually degraded.
eventually pick up a portion of it.
That was a twist, didn't see that coming.
That was,
Yeah,
I was not
they were ready
expecting
for
that
that.
either.
Very interesting.
We got a few orders.
Okay.
Let's see.
Just go down in order.
Oh, boy.
Sorry, Sherry, where did you spell it?
You gotta make it.
I don't know, I saw the Bruins last night, got home really late.
Ooh.
So,
There you go.
yeah, I know, but toast right now.
No, it's not as painful as last meeting.
You're right, that's a fact.
So we're doing 2A Hinkley Road for Gordon. And again, it's just amended special conditions. The regular specials are have stood. This is just the amended specials on the last page or two. You wanted triple the amount of shrubs, so that would be 57.
Mm-hmm.
One tree is allowed to be flush cut, allowing the staircase and the landing. Planting survival rate of 90% after 2 years. No chemicals, fine.
I like seeing the fine in the conditions.
Yeah, I
That's-
decided to start
Yeah,
doing that.
I don't,
Why not?
yeah, I think that's a good step. I haven't seen that before, I don't think.
Well, oftentimes enforcements come either without orders and conditions to begin with, so there's really no place to put it, or it's after the fact, we've already written it, so this is an amendment is what we do.
Yeah,
And then,
I have no comments on that one.
good?
So there is a small typo in the original special
Oh, let's fix
conditions.
that.
Number 2, the path to the,
Regular specials?
the original specials.
Okay.
The path to the dock shall and the location of the boathouse shall, maybe that isn't a typo, it just
No, I
didn't.
went over that too. It could have had, it's got the shell in front.
It should
Could be
just-
there, or it could be
It's
eliminated.
the path to the dock
Dock
and the boathouse
location of the
shall be.
boathouse.
Yeah, just strike the verse shall, yeah.
Right, yep.
But I,
Okay, picky,
I
picky.
I
Right,
saw
but
that and then thought it could stay.
I tripped on that one.
I did too.
Okay. Road.
I'm jumping ahead to 10 Chase Street. Do we actually say the applicant do their own shellfish mitigation?
Oh, yeah, right.
No, in the past, we have said, before we had that program,
Mm-hmm.
it just said the applicant shall do it. There was no way to monitor, there was really no way to make sure that they did.
They had a contract.
They had a contract.
Yeah, somebody, yeah.
So, yeah. Are you trying to do all the orders at the same time, with the same vote? Is that what you?
Well, it's up to you. I've gone through the first two with no comments.
Oh.
And this one I've looked at once. I'm going through it again just to be sure.
I didn't remember us saying that, though, that they could do it.
I think it should be either through a private contractor, so it can be documented.
That's what I meant, by
Yeah.
themselves as a private contractor.
Or through Department of Natural Resources,
But-
which is probably preferred.
Yeah, most people choose to do that.
How about wasn't some of that gonna be on-site?
Yes. Some mitigation to be on site.
Yeah.
And you see in the next one, I didn't, maybe in yours, I don't know if it's in red, but for number 8 for that one, a shellfish survey completed 30 days after installation and each year after for 3 years. What time of year do you want that done?
I think that the spring, when the last one was done, is when that area is gonna have less shellfish.
Right.
They did it in March. That area opens on December 1st and closes on either March 31st or April 1st. And so what you see is oysters tend to be thinned out towards the end. So I think it probably should be a fall survey.
My inclination was actually gonna be end of summer or early fall.
Yeah.
And also, that'll be before it gets so cold where the shellfish draw back down deeper
Yeah.
into the soil.
Yep, oysters don't go anywhere. I would say,
Clams do.
I like fall just because you can stress out shellfish if you dig in September, disrupting them.
Okay.
So I would say the fall, which really points to October, November, because
Okay.
the opening is December 1st.
So why don't I just say by October
Because-
31st?
Because isn't part of the point to see if the area hasn't been damaged, you know?
By the dock, yeah,
We wanted to see if it's going to,
right.
they're saying the same.
Well, it sounds like it's September, October, and November.
Is that the best time for photos of the salt marsh, too?
At the end of the growing season in September. Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. The survey would be 30 days and each year after 3 years. Is that what we agreed to? I'm just concerned about it. I wouldn't expect a lot of change.
Well, we could talk at the time of the certificate of compliance. I could also say after 3, I could put in language after 3 years, the commission may request additional monitoring.
Did we settle on the frequency? Because to my thought, 1 is limiting. 4 in 4 years could be habitat disrupting. Because Stantec does 100, cells.
He said every year, so.
Yeah, oh, we did say that, we voted, okay, whatever we
Yes.
voted on, I think that's fine, it's, that site's funny, to
Does
me,
it have to be
should
such a
have more
huge
shellfish than it did.
survey?
Well, right,
How small can it be and still be statistically valid?
Well, we're working on that, and what I made a proposal, I kind of followed Stantec's approach to have 100 cells. I think John Lowell has too few. The times that Pam Newberg has done like 120, 130, that's like too much. It's not necessary. So I think somewhere 50 to 100 is probably the window. And over 100 is overkill. So I think we should specify that based on our new protocols that are hopefully going to be, available at some point. We'll tell people how they should survey.
So you want a big survey for an initial application and then a smaller survey for the follow-ups?
Then you got different methods.
Yeah, the survey, I mean, it
Try to
should
be
be
s-
standard,
yeah.
so that you go out X many feet from the proposed structure in
Yeah.
each direction and do it however many feet on center. So, I mean, if you have an 80-foot long dock, then you're gonna get naturally more survey plots anyways. So I don't know if you, instead of maybe dictating a set number, maybe you can dictate the spacing and the distance from the proposed structure.
That's kind of what I did with a max of 100.
Right.
Max on any circumstances. So I think we just fine tune that and then maybe keep this language. And we're going to learn a lot. It's hard to say if there'll be a response in this short period of time. It's, time will tell. I meant to pass around this photo at the last hearing, but it's a dock on the west side, and it just shows the salt marsh loss under the dock. And this is kind of the rule for Herring River, not, the exception.
Right.
You see the scouring, here's the line of salt marsh, and you see this pocket that grows here where you have shading and you have scouring. And over time, you have some significant losses of salt marsh. And so, I'll pass that around, but that's the kind of thing that we'd love to avoid. And by going to a 1-to-5 ratio, we might start to see less of that.
What's the height on that one, Brad?
Looks like it's probably 1-to-1. But,
Is it your observation that that's more often than not?
yeah, I think between the two bridges, 28 and Lowell County, that's what I see. And I think recent docks, we've gone a little bit higher, a little more light penetration. We might be getting away from some of that, and you don't see this as much, say, in the water bodies that are not as active.
You see the placement of those piles
like-
is key.
Yeah, Allen's Harbor and Witchmere will have less of that impact because you don't have the flowing tide.
Wouldn't the monopile be advantageous as well?
Monopile would probably reduce the scouring by some amount. But that, I've been telling folks I want to take you out, but that's what you see in Herring River.
And be a little warmer.
And you can see it even worse where years ago these things were built even lower.
Right.
And you can see places where the dead zone is like this whole table.
Yeah.
It's like really a large area where the salt marsh just doesn't
If
survive.
that dock were graded instead of wood plank,
More light penetration.
more like it, you wonder what it'd look
Well,
like.
in these piles,
Yeah.
if these piles kicked out farther, expanded,
So
would have helped.
Yeah.
is it possible that some of the problem, excuse me, in a place like that is pressure-treated pilings and leaching stuff into the muck?
I don't think so because it's been a long time since EPA, well, in waterways, they still allow the old CCA, don't they? Or do they not?
We don't allow CCA.
Right. And that's been from the 90s, that's been a long time.
But ACQ is allowed.
Right.
And is it, what's the difference between CCA and ACQ?
Arsenic, or
CCA
no,
is chromium,
chromium.
copper, arsenic, all really bad stuff. For recreational uses, that's been banned since really like the mid-1990s. And what you buy at Home Depot, for example, press treat doesn't have that. It's gone. But for certain commercial applications, it can still be used, I think.
So they're taking down all these children's playgrounds.
I think it's shading and scouring. That's what I feel from just being out there for a long time. checking out these sites. And the more you can do to provide light, the better you are, and the less, if the pilings are right on that edge, then you got all kinds of scour that's gonna go on. And then it gets soft under here, and then it's not really good for shellfish habitat. Oysters will stick to anything, and that's why we hear that, you know, the clams like docks. Well, they really don't, but oysters are flexible. But you lose your quahog and your soft-shell clam habitat in that footprint. So, and then the boats is one additional impact that is beyond this. So, anyways, that was a little deviation, but I had that photograph. So,
Well, I still have a question on 7 about the mitigation, because we talked about during that whole process, they were gonna have some specific on-site mitigation
Right.
there.
I was gonna change the wording, saying some.
Was it all gonna be there?
No.
No, that's what I was,
I was gonna, maybe with the direction of the natural resource director as to how much should go there.
so some of it was of the 30 bushels,
Yes,
not in addition to the 30 bushels.
not in addition, in part of it.
that was a pitch that they made, is that
Right.
some of it would be
Some of
on-site.
it would be on-site.
And that sounds like a good idea. I mean, it's an area that doesn't get seeded, 'cause it's kind of hard to get to, but it's an area that is fished because it's productive. So the seeding will help for those couple of years.
And we're changing wording that it's not the applicant that's doing it.
I think the applicant could hire a contractor, but I'd rather see.
Under the direction of the natural resource.
Yes, the applicant may complete the seeding with the direction of the natural resource director, or they may do this to contribute to
Right.
the shellfish fund. You can't make them go with our, like,
I think that's-
biotone.
But we can make them document what they do. It's-
Right, exactly, they have to document it.
If there was with me, I'd say, yeah, I'll do it myself, and then you'd get what I gave you. And it's-
Right, I know, right.
Yeah.
So when we
No.
do the mitigation, the 30 bushels, it's the funds given to Heinz to do the
Yes,
calc,
we-
to buy the 30.
We established a special fund for just shellfish mitigation that myself and Heinz have. So we accept the funds, he purchases the X number of clams, and they go, like if it's in Herring River, it's gonna go in Herring River. If it's in Richmond Harbor, it's in Richmond Harbor. So we've been doing that to get better compliance, because we've always required shellfish mitigation, but we got very little way of compliance because people weren't doing it on their own. So now we made it easy for them to comply
I got a
at
comment.
cost.
Do you have an educated guess as to what the volume is annually?
How much? Well, it's gone up substantially since we've offered this program.
What I mean is quantity of seed,
In
approximately.
addition to what Heinz is already doing, because I don't know what Heinz is already doing, I would say we probably have about 5 to 6 docks right now that have to do the 30 bushels a year.
Mhm.
So
So that's 150 bushel a year. That's a lot.
It sure
Of seed
It's a lot.
area.
Yeah,
So
but
those
you
other-
can't bring habitat back if you damage it.
Well, that, I
You
agree
can
with
seed
that.
all you want.
allow them to do
Yeah,
the seeding?
it's like
It
a
was
really-
silent on it. It just said shellfish
Is-
mitigation shall be completed in the amount of 30 bushels.
Is there a point
Did they
where
request that they were?
over mitigation
be
becomes
allowed
harmful?
to do it?
They offered to do it,
I
but there
would
was
say no.
Oh,
no.
they did? I
Your survival
couldn't
rate might
remember that.
decline.
Yeah, no, this was
But it wouldn't
before
really
your
be
time.
harmful.
No, I mean
You know,
with this
instead of getting a
applicant.
10% survival rate, you might get a 7
Why
or
would
something.
we even offer that
What would you
option?
consider a pretty good survival rate now?
As a
I don't want to
20%
make
or
it
more?
also
I don't,
sound
I'd have
like
to look
we're
into it.
making
Yeah,
them.
the pros, you
give
know,
money to
at
the
the
town.
culture facility would know that.
Mhm.
And I don't have that.
But
But I've heard them throw out 10%.
that's how
I
the
have
other
to look
one
into
did
that.
it.
Well, that's not a lot,
By
though.
giving the
It's an
money to
option.
the.
No, a lot of them
These
die.
guys
Yeah,
don't do
it's
it.
survival of the fittest out there. A lot of that seed is not gonna survive.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
the habitat quality is part of it.
As to what the proper wording was,
And,
really.
density is the other part. So, got a question on number 12, the mowing of the meadow. One concern I have is that when properties change hands, what I've seen over the years in Harwich is you can see a lot of places where they couldn't do things, and with new property owner, they just start doing
I
things.
understand.
And so, is there anything that could be added to that language to make it tighter? Time of year, mowing
The time of year would be in the fall.
in the fall. Did we talk about depth of mowing? We can't put it in there if we didn't talk about it. Yeah. I'd like to see like a high depth once a year in the fall, and just try to discourage future owners from coming in and just doing what they want, which is what.
It's like the
We
new
just say this
owner,
area is not to become lawn area, this
Putting their
condition
float on
shall
the
be
marsh.
remain in perpetuity, shall not be released by a certain.
Okay, that'd be good.
The hard part to that, Brett, is how do you pass the message down to the new owner?
because I was gonna say,
Right.
what about,
That's a tough one.
It is. And I see it, being around town a long time, I've seen it a lot, but can you blame the new owners? They don't know.
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
We've been
regardless
close on
of the
the margins,
diligence
but-
that they
I mean,
go
it's-
through or not, if they didn't
It's-
happen to uncover the order of conditions, and actually take the time to read it,
Right. Then I think we have to enforce it, and that means having strong language here.
And now, Nikki checks the sales who, bought houses weekly.
Yeah.
And she sends new letters out, and sometimes it's as simple as if you want to do anything, you need permission within 100 feet of a wetland. Other times sometimes we catch it when there's a real estate transaction, if there's an ongoing order of conditions, and we can make them alert of it at that point in time.
Yeah.
So we're trying to not get these violations because
Right.
of new people maybe not knowing.
Yeah, and educate folks.
Yeah,
So that's valuable.
We've gotten several people who have followed up with us after getting one of those letters, so it's working.
Yeah,
Is
it's
there
great.
some way we can flag the deeds? When we do a title search?
Well, it's
Well, the order of
it's order of
conditions
conditions
raises
is on
it
the
up.
deeds,
Yeah.
that's the responsibility of
But then,
the attorneys we can't do that.
well, I think
There's no way.
going like, not just the order of conditions, but just the fact that that property has a wetlands part of it, so that they would know that they can't do things without.
We talk to real estate agents, we give presentations, but,
Say that.
we try to get the information out there as best as we can.
Yeah.
that's all you can do.
Any further comments on these 6 orders, or 5 orders? I've been through them all.
We announce all the addresses at least.
Yep, we'll just make sure everyone's okay with them. If you don't mind, I'll fly through it. You guys all right?
Yep.
Okay, well then I motion that we approve the order of conditions for the 5 following orders for 2A Hinckley Road, 5 Brooks Road, 10 Chase Street, 2 Lake Shore Drive, and 27 Soundview Road.
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries approving all 5. I did forget to download the minutes. I was scrambling to download stuff today and I didn't. So I don't know if you have any
Want to
paper.
take a few minutes and look at them?
Do you have any paper copies? Because I haven't.
I do. I only have one, so you have to make notes.
Read mine.
Okay, I can read this right here.
I already read it.
I'll be right back. If you're gonna do that real quick.
Yeah.
Why did I only have July 2nd?
I don't know, it says July 2nd.
Yeah, it does.
The July 2nd minutes, they had 23 Snowing Road do a presentation at that one too. And it's interesting in here, they make a statement they'd be reluctant to
Yep,
stop
that one is.
fertilizing in this area where they're gonna be doing the reconfiguration.
Yeah, where's the July one?
Yeah,
When
so
I
they've,
check on July 2nd, I come
There's
up
some
with
movement there.
January
And
2nd.
it says July 2nd on top, but in her notes, it says the July 2nd.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it is January 2nd, yeah. It's
Oh,
the
good.
January 2nd meeting.
So that's,
Snowing Road is in there.
There was no January 8th.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it
'cause-
was.
But they're not, they didn't get out there. The minutes from January 2nd, 2019. Neither of which is listed in the minutes here.
It says Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019.
Neither of which is listed in our agenda.
What's in the agenda?
The agenda says July 2nd, 2019, and January 8th,
2020.
2020. So I have to ask Amy if we can approve these.
But isn't this July 2nd? Isn't the,
It says July 2nd on top, but it says
what's in the
January
meeting?
2nd here.
we didn't do Ships Haven.
No,
We
I
didn't
know.
have a
We
meeting.
didn't do one on January 2nd of 2019, it's saying here. Not January of 2020. This says for 2020.
What do you need?
Okay, July 2nd, 2019 minutes.
Yeah.
Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019. On our agenda, it says minutes July 2nd,
Oh, that's
January
January.
8th.
Yeah, it's not January. Let me see.
Yeah, January 8th was our meeting.
Right, but
But these aren't the minutes.
these hearings aren't from
No, these
last
aren't.
meeting.
No.
So this is July.
No, but it's not. It says January 2nd,
January 2nd.
2019.
It's not July.
It says
And on the
July,
agenda, it says, should be
July 2nd.
All right, don't vote on,
Does
let
it-
me clarify it with Nikki.
To see in a minute, I mean, that's what it said, July 2nd.
We want to make sure it's the right date.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a quick comment I'm going to give you just because I might forget it or not be here.
If you could write it down, because I don't have a copy.
Okay.
On your copy would, or a
Yep.
copy would be great.
I don't have a copy either.
Oh, wait a minute, I do. Never mind, you want I do,
All right.
actually.
Okay, what's your comment anyway?
What is your comment?
On the last page, there is, at the top of page 21, Uncle Vini's. I would add road after Uncle Vini's, and then they will find, because of, they did not provide a vegetation update, they installed irrigation, and I observed direct evidence of fertilizing. The pellets were down on the lawn. So I would add observed fertilizer application
Yeah.
to that. And that's all I had,
I'm
but
gonna say,
but
'cause
I
this
guess,
was the July, this
you
had
won't
to have
vote
been the
today.
July meeting. It had to have been July 2nd.
You all set?
yeah,
And that's what it calls for
Okay.
here, but it's
All right.
pulled up January 2nd.
You know what, I think, so, it's on the agenda as being July 2nd. Or, on our agenda for what we have to vote for. The hearings in here, there's continuances till July 17th, so that would make the meeting July 2nd. So it was just a typo on the first
On
page
the
of
January.
30 minutes, that it's January, so it is July 2nd. So if you're comfortable with voting them with those changes,
any other,
let me know.
I think that's what it is, because I
Yeah.
was not at the July meeting,
All right.
and I'm not in this meeting.
Okay.
yeah.
Are you all comfortable with voting on these as July 2nd?
Yes.
I am, everyone's been through it? All right, well, I motion we approve the minutes for July 2nd, 2019.
Second.
Seconded by John, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I had other things on here, but I didn't know if we would get to them or not. I haven't had a chance to go through much more.
I think just an update on your thoughts on the dock and pier regulations, you know, if you, so right now, nothing's settled for meeting.
Right now, the only time I think we could have a joint meeting is February 5th in conjunction with our Conservation Commission hearing. Maybe we would want to put it on first for an hour, if we were to do that, and then transition into hearings. But that's the only time we can do it, between now and the submission deadline of February 14th, if we were to try to get on town meeting for dock and pier. I already have the wetlands bylaw on for next meeting, but that's not really a joint meeting, we can do that towards the end.
Oh, good.
So I think the wetlands bylaw, we could definitely get some changes in for a regular town meeting. I haven't, with everybody's schedules coming up that week in February, the only time I think we could meet is the 5th for,
Yeah.
with waterways.
Yeah.
And then we'd have to be in agreement at that
Then you
meeting.
have to be in
Yeah.
agreement at that meeting.
My feeling, the sentiment I got
Yeah.
was that I don't want to be accused of pushing this.
Right, and you also don't want to go on town meeting floor with opposing views. You want to try to come to some consensus
Right.
before you go to town meeting floor. I have asked, and I have not gotten a response, if we're going to have a special town meeting in addition to regular town meeting in May. We usually do right at the end. Or if not then, is there, I know we have, I've been told we have the funds to do a special town meeting in the fall,
Mhm.
if we wanted to. So I agree, I don't think we should push it if there's not agreement right now.
I think the whole idea of if we're going to have criteria for shellfish significant habitat, I don't think we're there yet. You know, I've got a proposal on paper, but, you know, Stan brought up the point that, you know, frequency of occurrence of shellfish is, you know, it can be 10% if you have 100 shellfish, if you have 10, given your plot numbers. So I'm not certain that we're ready for that. Other things, I feel like setback and water depth, you know, we heard some concern about that, but honestly, I think those things would have to provide protections that I think we're all interested in. So there's some things I think we're closer to, but I don't think we should rush it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Second, that is April
Yeah, and you wanna-
vacation.
February vacation.
Are you around April February vacation?
I usually go skiing that week.
Our meetings are the 5th and the 19th.
The
Yeah.
19th is in the middle of vacation.
I usually miss that one.
Okay.
And so if we can't get it on town meeting for May, then I don't think I think we take our time with this and work with everybody and try to get consensus, because I hate to have something that I think is really good, and then people oppose it at town meeting and all of a sudden doesn't go anywhere.
You don't want two boards to go against each other on town meeting.
Yeah. No, even though the, you know, Conservation Authority's here,
Right.
but things can happen. I may also miss the February 5th meeting too.
Okay.
That could come up as well. So if we're gonna work in the bylaws, what I would do is try to review what you have and what I had. Because that's just, I think I know what would be changed for that. Things like off-season storage.
So for wetlands, I mean, it's just the bylaws, again, broad brush, the regulations are the more like specifics about
Right.
things. I did make extra copies of the draft bylaw revisions under wetlands bylaw, if you
Okay.
want a paper copy.
Yeah.
And we will do this at the next meeting.
Okay, so-
we do need a vote at the next meeting.
Yeah, so if I'm gonna miss that one, then I'll just get you my comments, even though. if I
So
can't-
the changes, the omissions, this is what's online too.
Yeah, but this is way,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm no.
I do better proofreading when I have it in my hands, so. Additions are in red, omissions are strike through. We don't do that tonight, but, we would, technically it's gonna be a public hearing on this, because we have to have a public hearing, so that's why you see it advertised for this next time.
All right, so this wouldn't have things like
February
the
5th?
off-season storage.
No, that would be a reg.
Yep. What I'll do, Amy, is I'm gonna work on the cumulative effect language, because
Yeah.
I really think that's important.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, Barnstable has several pages that kind of
Right.
look at that, and so we should have.
For the
more-
bylaws?
Mhm.
Yeah. I think we should have more, and, you know, certainly Herring River's a place that needs that consideration, I think. Okay.
Right,
And
so, MACC, there is, I haven't gotten the, I don't know if I got the sign up. Has anybody got the sign up for the annual conference at the end of February?
I keep getting emails.
I got a save the date, but, so the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, which we are a part of, has their annual conference. It's gonna be the last Saturday of February this year. It's usually the first Saturday of March.
A new email, like today.
Check it,
with
if you
the-
wanna go, we will pay for you. It's in Worcester. It's all day. It's normally snowing.
That's why
Um,
that's why I said I'm not doing it
yeah,
this year.
no, definitely,
Maybe you're
yeah.
the reason it's.
But we do pay for you, so if you wanna go, you can go.
I got the notification, but I'm not going to attend.
Trying to get more stuff down here.
Be better, especially in February.
or any time of year. Hannah and I, our AmeriCorps member, are giving presentations to the men's and women's groups at the community center in the next month. Kind of about what we do, and also just about our conservation areas, and looking for more volunteers for some stewardship activities and things like that, so.
At the breakfast, or?
At the breakfast, yeah.
When is that?
Well, men's breakfast is always the second Friday of the month
At the community center.
at the community center.
Never heard of it.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
I meant, yeah.
I did it for every year until the last 3 years, till I started volunteering on Fridays, and I couldn't go to breakfast
One
anymore.
Friday a month
Put out a
for men,
breakfast
one
for you?
women. They bring in
Put out a
different
breakfast?
topics from around
People I've heard
town.
go really like them.
They bring in different speakers, like, from around town to do presentations on something of interest, and it's by donation, and it's a beautiful breakfast that our town chef.
Sounds like a great time. I'd never,
Right.
Yeah.
I will send you the information.
thank you.
I think was it more
It gets
geared
about
to,
over-
was it
over
geared
50
more
people
towards the
come.
council on aging, and that's why it was for
It
us
is.
old people?
Yeah,
I
it is,
think
but
that's
it's
what it was
not-
directed at, that's why you brought it.
Yeah.
Are always the old people.
Yeah, you young whippersnappers, never heard of this.
That
I'm
could well
not feeling
be.
so young myself.
I understand, believe me,
It'll
I
ask for
do.
your birthday when you show up. See how old you are.
Because it was run by.
I got one quick thing.
Kevin, who started it, so I think it was geared more towards the seniors,
Yeah.
or originally anyways.
One quick thing, Bell's Neck Bog. In the interest of preserving the main bog, it would be advantageous to flood it.
This on Friday, so that's.
Close the flume going out to the pump house. And just that central bog, get some water in there and protect the bonds.
Yeah. I will say one thing, there's a phenomenal amount of vital cranberries that were produced in that section that
Mhm.
just went unpicked.
Yeah.
And so I really want to get involved revisiting future management soon, and I like the idea of a pick your own concept, that may be something to talk about. A lot of cranberries are there.
It's an interesting idea.
Well, you know, if we're gonna, if that section is gonna be salvaged, then maybe let people know. Right now, people go out there, and some people do. Some people are afraid of the poison ivy, but really high density of cranberries that are just hanging in there.
Well, there's a ton of people who've gone out there and picked.
Yeah,
The little section over by the pump house, there's some berries out there too. That's even easier to access.
right.
But if somebody was actually gonna undertake that section to care for, pick your own issue is, anybody that manages a bog is gonna be very much opposed to it just because of the nature of it. The foot traffic just beats everything to death. But maybe that little area by the pump house, maybe that could be dedicated to that.
Right. I'm suggesting that if we don't go to a lease situation, we don't have, you know, future management by another party, then just have a period of time that people can go out there and grab it. And right now, people can.
You just have a day or something, or like
Yeah,
it's
promote it.
specified. I mean, you can go anyways, but like if you wanted to try to control it a little bit.
Yeah, Craig hasn't done anything out there for a long time, and those berries in that section keep coming back. And that'll eventually fade away if there's nothing done, but.
Well, that's a new variety on that section right there. The older varieties, the heirloom varieties are further out.
Okay.
There's been some mixing too because of cross-pollination, but the most intent part of it is right there. And for
Yeah.
the sake of preserving that section, it would be advantageous and
How long do we flood them for?
probably hold the water for another 6 weeks or so.
Okay. Yeah, Ray's got all his bogs.
Yeah, everybody else is
flooded,
flooded. You know, you should try to protect it and let it out after a
You
while.
let me know what you want to do.
Yeah,
If you
'cause
want
I-
me to flood them, we'll flood them, but
I'll
if
be-
you don't want me to touch the water, I won't.
I think I agree with Mark. The only thing I'd like to say is I feel like we're not getting together on the future management process. So I missed the meeting, and I guess we talked about it, but we didn't formally vote for a subcommittee. Is that the way it went? Or-
It was a conversation. I don't, Jim and I had met over there and we actually had a conversation about it and,
Right,
and I felt we came to some middle ground with
right.
some good impact. I think ultimately our opinions were the same in the opportunity to salvage that central bog right there.
Right.
still exists, and it would be viable. I think overall, from what I'm hearing throughout the cranberry industry, there's some positive things that have taken place in the last year. The market has changed to some degree. I don't think anybody's getting particularly rich, but there's been some positive things that have gone on. And, I mean, I know of one case up in Sandwich where just recently a gentleman out of the blue bought 42 acres of cranberry bog, and he didn't know the difference between a cranberry bog and cranberry juice, but he's dead set on learning.
Giving it a go.
You know?
Amy, what do you think about the idea of having an group meet committee, or having a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission? Because I just want to get going with this. I feel like it's something we need to do.
It cannot be, so, it could be 3 of you.
Right.
Cannot be a quorum
Right.
of this,
Right.
so 3 would be enough.
Okay.
I'm fine with that, and I'd be happy to work with you. I want to be
Right.
part of that when you meet, so.
Right. Anyone else have an interest in being on that group? I know Jim and Mark would.
I would be willing to participate, not so much bringing opinions and insights, but as a scribe or something, you know. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that part of the transition that has to happen is getting something in writing
Right.
that we can then talk about and either vote on or agree to modify or something.
Right.
So getting from the point where there are some ideas floating around
Mhm.
and some strong opinions, to having that stuff written on paper where we can do something with it. So I don't have a clear concept of what that has to be, a set of management principles.
I think a management plan, it can begin with options, and then eventually it moves
The
towards something
commission
we
has
vote
to
on.
vote on it.
Yeah, so I think that we need to start the vetting process for options, and then eventually get something that can be voted on, and you know, the public, I think, would like to see something done over there. And so I asked Larry Valentine about, would it preclude you from voting on, you know, the plan later on, and he felt like not necessarily.
Right.
So, and if I can't vote, I still want to be on the committee to really get active with the management plan, so, but maybe, if it doesn't preclude people from voting, then you could certainly,
Are you sure it's not a voting form, so we don't have to take minutes, so we don't have to?
If you're,
Yeah.
I mean, if you
Your
want to do it,
agendas.
I don't need to interject myself. I mean, it would be you and Jim and Mark. Is that what you're proposing?
well, I wasn't there for the last meeting, so I wasn't sure just what happened. I know that Jim and Mark got together. I've been working on this issue to various degrees for a long time, 10 years, and, but,
I would step back because I don't bring as much knowledge.
what we could do is we could bring like the roughest draft back to the committee for, you know, discussion. And, you know,
Yeah.
work with Amy to get something that's a draft that has some options, and then it's gonna take a while to get a product that is finished. And in the end, we have to decide, you know, what we wanna do. So, you want me,
I thought you were more in favor of naturalization.
I still am. Yeah, I absolutely am. But at the same time, I don't think that we should preclude options, evaluating options. And if one of those options includes having a chunk of that be promoted as a pick-your-own spot, celebrate the cranberries there and manage it to try to keep the vines, you know, flood them in the winter, I don't mind that also. But my preference is still naturalization. I think Mark's preference is something different.
To a degree, but I mean, I'm not necessarily 100% sold on that. I mean, given the consideration of, or the condition of the two opposing ends, that's where the bulk of the effort and expense would be to try to recover. That would be the hardest recovery. That central area has some viability to it, much more than the rest of it. So, I mean, my posture would be to try to maintain that and generate it and keep it active for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I would even suggest offering it for stewardship to a qualified individual or group to try to keep it active.
Cape Cod Tech have any interest in that kind of stuff?
That's a good question, but whoever would take it on would have to have the ability to do that. One of the issues with going to an agricultural school would be in the growing season when certain things are necessary to do, they're not in school. So that's an issue. I don't know. I mean, there's problems with every aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know, the maintenance factor, some of the equipment that's necessary. The big thing is water management. That's huge.
Oh, I know, and I feel like we need to step up with that. Well, let me do this, and you guys tell me if you think it's appropriate. I'm gonna move that we ask Amy to flood the bog for a necessary period to protect the vines with no movement of water, I think, say after February 15th, meaning no more water from the reservoir in.
No, I mean, we'll try to get some next week.
Right.
By early next week.
Just so in advance of the herring run, there's no shifting of water from the reservoir. And then also in that motion that we form a Conservation Commission subcommittee
Yeah.
to have 3 members, and I'll go ahead and nominate Mark, Jim, I don't know if it's appropriate to nominate myself. Is that okay?
How about if I nominate you?
Okay, thank you. Okay, does that make sense?
Surely.
What section of the bog specifically do you want flooded again?
Just the center of the main section. The part that's directly
the
adjacent
compost.
to the left when you drive in. The one where the flume comes directly from the pond.
Yeah.
There's a flume that goes under the main road when you drive in.
Okay.
That can be dammed right there. That'll stop the outflow.
Okay,
And-
see how we don't have boards there right now. That's open, right?
Well, no, you just drop some boards in it.
Yeah, all right, I'll see what we can do.
If you need help, I'd be happy to help you, but
I have a feeling I have a couple people who'd be happy to help me here. so.
I'm sure.
Say the word, I'll be glad to do it.
Let me see what
Okay.
lines in DPW can do.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Second, any discussion? I think it's good to start it, and we'll come back, and I'd like to, update the full commission frequently, and then have you guys review drafts. Keep that open process going. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay. And new, I motion we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Spring, we could go look at.
All those in favor?
Yeah, there you go.
If I can
Did you
stop
fall
this.
asleep
Take
just then?
pictures.